I remember waking up and taking in a breath and thinking, this is what breathing is supposed to feel like. You land and you're greeted by people in hazmat suits taking your temperature. It was like the world had changed in midair. Life hasn't found a way of letting me be defined by my cystic fibrosis. There are all kinds of ways to enjoy Pokemon. Just stripping back all of the years of putting on whatever kind of show you're putting on or the front that you're presenting to the world.
If I really want something and I really want to go for it, there's no doubt you're going to put in the work. Luck is a huge element of things. Processes are a huge element of things, but sometimes you gotta sit your ass down and just elbow grease them.
Strong Pokemon, weak Pokemon, that is only the selfish perception. Truly skilled trainers try and with their favourite. Saying that you're a nerd is another way of saying that I'm really passionate about something. All you nerds out there, we see you and we celebrate you. Keep doing you.
My question to you is, do you see yourself as an entrepreneur?
Entrepreneur conveying nostalgic merriment to the world. In terms of other games, I found increasingly that I'll pick them up, try them, and just think, it's fun, but it's not Pokemon.
Welcome everyone to another episode of Everyday Empires. I have a wonderful gentleman with me, an old school friend, Charlie Merriman. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks so much, Rohit. Thank you for having me. I'm very much looking forward to this, and I was very flattered when you reached out. It's going to be fun.
I'm very excited about your story. It's multifaceted and wild, and I'm going to try and get this right because you're a very talented human being. And correct me. You are a host and commentator for the Pokemon Video Game Championships.
Yep.
Content creator.
Yep.
Mainly around Pokemon, which is one of my favorite topics. So we're going to get into this. Actor and comedian.
And writer. You're so close. There is all very much a similar sort of bag, isn't it? But yeah, no. Multi-hyphenate. I think that's kind of, in one way, something I always wanted to be, someone who does lots of different things because of various kinds of interests. So yeah.
So we have a tradition on the show.
Yeah.
Where we ask...
I'm going to pretend I don't know what's going on.
Where we ask our guest a top question, just so the audience can get to know you a little bit.
Yeah.
And that question is, what's the biggest screw up to date? And how did you bounce back from it?
Yeah, well, I don't know if this is the biggest, but this is certainly one that immediately comes to mind. So I was an extra in a couple of the Harry Potter films.
Oh.
I was in Order of the Phoenix and Half-Blood Prince. And on set, this is actually a scene where you can see me in the finished cut of the film. It was a scene in the Gryffindor common room. It's just after the opening feast in the Great Hall. And Harry and Seamus have an argument because Harry's saying Voldemort's back and Seamus doesn't believe him. So I was I was in that scene. I was stationed somewhere that the direction was Harry comes in and everything goes quiet and you will look at him suspiciously. So I was doing that, and I just happened to be stationed next to where some of the main cast were. So in that scene, you've got Parvati and Padma Patil sitting next to each other. You've got Fred and George Weasley, and I don't know. I think after lunch break or something, we went back. We reset to our original positions. I must be like looking behind me, not looking where I'm going, talking to my friend. I fall over Parvati Patil. So I literally collide. She sat down. I collide with her, with the actress playing Parvati Patil. And obviously I'm like this extra. This is the fifth film they've all done together. They're like, who are you? Why are you suddenly on my lap? Sort of thing. And that was how I met those actors. And I'd love to say that it was the start of and then we got to know each other and now we're best friends. But because I was mortified. I was like around year 7 at this point, so around 11 years old. So for the rest of the day, it was just very awkward standing next to those cast members, not wanting to turn around, not wanting to look at them because I'd embarrassed myself so much because I'd literally just collided with one of them and sort of gone head over heels, sort of opening my eyes and they're all standing over me sort of thing. It was kind of it was an awkward rest of the day. And when you're a young person trying to make the name as an actor, it was not the best way to ingratiate yourself.
Well, they all seem like lovely people.
Oh yeah, for sure.
I'm certain they would have been, oh Charlie, it's absolutely fine, don't worry about it. Come on in.
I hope so. I guess, at that age, all of the actors, everyone playing a Hogwarts student, all very young. So yeah, I don't know what their reaction was, but yeah, I was certainly very embarrassed about it.
Do you think if you met any of them again, they would recognise you and go, "Oh, Charlie,
I don't think
remember
so.
that time when you?"
I don't think they remember. I did speak to Daniel Radcliffe a fair bit, actually, because at the time people thought, and still a little bit, people think I look like him. At the time I had hair that, I can see Tanya nodding as well, I think Tanya agrees. I had hair that was similar length to Daniel Radcliffe at the time. He had it really long for Goblet of Fire, and I had it long then. And so he might remember me as the person who looked a bit like him. We did have a couple of conversations on set, but probably not. I remember actually there was one scene where we were leaving the Great Hall, we were filming The Feast, and it's so funny filming The Feast in the Great Hall because I was put into the Gryffindor house, as I said, which, you know, as an 11-year-old I was buzzing about. But in the Great Hall, you'll have a camera station at one end of the very long tables in the Great Hall capturing it. And obviously all the extras want to be on camera, so they're sort of leaning in, trying to be on camera, as if you're sort of like eating like that. And so I was doing that. But anyway, filing out of the Great Hall one day, and Michael Gambon, the late Michael Gambon, who played Dumbledore, the late Michael Gambon stopped me. And I was like, oh my goodness, what's about to happen? And he says, do you get to keep these robes that you're wearing? And I was like, no, we return them to the costume department. And he goes, oh, shame. That was it. So that was my conversation with Michael Gambon. That's as far as I went. But
he clearly thought you looked great in that robe.
But clearly, yeah, I don't know why he chose me out of all the others. Maybe he thought I was Danny Radcliffe. Maybe, I mean, if people thought I looked like it, maybe he thought he was just talking to an old friend. But sorry, mate. No.
What a man. Yeah, he was a fantastic actor. He was phenomenal.
Yeah. You know, I haven't watched the Harry Potters for a very long time. Maybe I should rectify that. But
absolutely. I know we'll get into this later in the episode, but I've got a burning question.
Yeah.
What does a commentator for the Pokemon video game championships actually do?
Yeah. If you thought that we left Pokemon behind in the 90s, think again. It's going from strength to strength. There are big competitive Pokemon events throughout the year, all across the globe. Some of your listeners and watchers might be familiar with how Pokemon battles work from back in the day, playing the games as a child. And it's that. You're using your moves against the opponent's Pokemon, and the first to knock out all of your opponent's Pokemon wins. The only difference is that the official competitive format is double battle, so it's 2 of your Pokemon against your opponent's Pokemon. I'm sure we'll get into this later, but the way the game works is essentially rock, paper, scissors meets chess meets poker. And as a commentator, I will guide people through how those battles work, what's going through the trainer's mind, why things are exciting when we say they are. I also host, so I will welcome viewers into the event. I have a background in acting, which again we'll talk about. And so, yeah, it's just making competitive Pokemon, which, one of the, I think, estimated to be the world's highest grossing media franchise, as accessible as possible.
Wow. And to give the audience a flavour, and me a flavour, of how many people sort of come to these events, watch these events.
Sure.
I imagine it's thousands.
So I recently commentated the European International Championships, which was in London at the Excel Centre at the end of February. The total number of attendees there was 13,000. In terms of... You've got 4 games going on at those events. The video game, which is my area of expertise, the trading card game, Pokemon Go, and Pokemon Unite, which is a new MOBA game for the Switch. And then those are all, or most of them, split into age divisions, juniors, seniors, and masters, the oldest one. In terms of the competitors for the masters division at the video game championships that I was commentating, that was more than 1,400 players there. And in terms of the viewership, I believe on the final day of the event, it was a 3-day event, so on Championship Sunday, it was around 400,000 viewers this year, as opposed to, which is roughly 3 times what it was last year. So it really is like, the graph is exponential, and it's a very exciting time to be involved with
That's
Pokemon.
Incredible. That's incredible. Do you get nervous knowing 400,000 people are listening to you?
Well, I mean, it goes out on the official Pokemon YouTube channel, which is like 6.5 million subscribers. So there's the potential for it to be more than that. But I don't know. It's all about, as I'm sure you know if you're doing this podcast, and again, we'll get into this, but I do a podcast myself around Pokemon. It's all about making every individual viewer feel like the only person that's watching. And I think when you just have a camera in your face, when you can't actually see a sea of people, it's easier to do that. Having said that, I did do the opening ceremony and the closing ceremony at the European International Championships, or EUIC, this year, where you do look out over those people. But again, my background in acting and performing has sort of helped me feel like that's just par for the course.
Wow. That's impressive. We're definitely going to get more into that. But I just, when you told me this is what, when we reconnected recently, and you told me this is what you do, I was sort of sitting there going, wow, I've got to look this up. And it's incredible. And Pokemon, for those that, I guess we can broadly use the term millennials, that was how I grew up in the 90s. That was the go-to video game. It was the thing I played on my Game Boy in the back of the car when we were going on long trips and had no idea where we were going, but or finished off the day. Sometimes you woke up. It's a little bit obsessed, but and watching the cartoons and all the rest of it, it's a huge part of certainly how I grew up. I'm sure a lot of people in their sort of late 20s and sort of 30s grew up as well. Do you find that, when you were playing those games early on, it has sort of kept your passion alive all these years, or has the passion moved up and down and you've reconnected with Pokemon through your journey?
First of all, I've just had that zoomed out moment of I'm very much holding a grommet with a red-nosed mug while we're having a fairly serious discussion about a children's franchise, or family franchise anyway. But that aside, I think, like you, growing up, Pokemon was my go-to game. I think there's a sweet spot that happens with Pokemon or any other game or any other franchise that people get into, where you just happen to be the right age for it at the time. And I think Pokemon's very much that. I love animals, and I think that's part of why I love Pokemon. So when I was younger, I played a lot. Arguably too much, but given what I do now, maybe there is never too much. You can argue it either way. And then, you're right. There were ebbs and flows. I think I was playing it growing up, and then as school got more serious, I sort of dipped out of it. I found myself rewarding myself when I finished my A levels. I treated myself to the latest Pokemon game at the time, which was Pokemon White Generation 5. And then when I had an offer from drama school, I treated myself to Generation 4, Pokemon Platinum. I haven't played that one yet. And then it was over the pandemic that I got really back into it, which again we'll talk about later. But so it was ebbs and flows, but it's always been there. And possibly because it was ebbs and flows, it's meant that I've kept up the interest. It was never sort of too much at once. And so now here we are today.
That's fascinating. Talking about childhoods and growing up. Let's dip into yours.
Yeah.
So I found out again quite recently that you were born in Singapore.
Yeah.
What was that? Well, I mean, not that you remember.
I can't remember, mate. I'm afraid.
But when did you move from Singapore? So what kind of age were you there? Do you remember anything of Singapore?
I don't, because I was only there for the first year or so of my life.
Okay.
Having said that, did go back on a family holiday after GCSEs, I think it was. And strangely, even though I had no conscious memory of it, it did kind of feel like home. It felt very familiar on clearly some subliminal level. I don't know, there were some memories of the images from Singapore there. But so I was born in Singapore, and whenever my mum fed me as a baby, I would essentially just throw it back up. And I wasn't putting on weight, and so it was a very concerning time for my parents. Mum would take me around doctors in Singapore. They didn't really know what was wrong, and so decided to fly back to the UK with baby me to try and seek a diagnosis there. And it was at Southampton General Hospital where I was diagnosed with cystic fibrosis. Now, as I was saying to you before, this is a condition that affects cell membranes. It means that salt and water can't flow between cells as easily as they should. That leads to thicker bodily secretions, and that ultimately means that it's easier for bacteria and so on to settle. So people with cystic fibrosis are more prone to infection. And so I had a diagnosis there, and I believe I'm right in saying that when my mum was in one waiting room back in Singapore that obviously proved fruitless, a white doctor walked through. Didn't think anything of it, and then mum arrives in Southampton, and the doctor that diagnoses me is that doctor who just happened to walk through the waiting room in Singapore, which is absolutely unbelievable. I believe, obviously I don't remember, but I believe that's the story that my parents told me. And so what that meant was that I guess the biggest thing for when you're that age is you need to take enzymes to digest food. We all have enzymes in our bodies, but with cystic fibrosis, the enzymes can't get out of the pancreas. Okay. And so I take enzymes in pill form to digest food. So after an enzyme, then my mum would be able to feed me and I wouldn't throw it back up and I put on weight. And very reassuring and a relief for my parents. And again, obviously, I can't imagine how stressful and difficult it must have been, and frustrating, the fact that I would always just throw up when I was fed and the fact that I wasn't putting on weight.
It's really fascinating because we're just a time frame this, so we're talking sort of early 90s, like 92, 93, 94 kind of time. And was there a particular reason why, I mean, Singaporean doctors are some of the best doctors in the world.
Yeah.
Was there a reason why they couldn't? Is it a condition they just didn't see in the Asian population?
Yeah,
or?
I think it's that. I believe I'm right in saying, I apologise for any inaccuracies, but it's very much a Western condition. I don't think it's had really been heard of over there.
Yeah, it's a genetic
condition, yeah. But neither of my parents have it. It's a recessive gene. I mentioned to you before this was actually a module we studied in GCSE biology back at school, which I did very well in. But both my parents clearly had the recessive gene, and then it manifested itself in me. And that's often the way with cystic fibrosis. You don't know that it's in the family until you have a baby with it. Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. And so you've lived through that for a huge chunk of your life. I mean, what was it like when you were sort of younger, and I presume mum was just saying, take this pill so you can eat?
I think it's just one of those things that I have no knowledge of anything else. I've just grown up with it, and so I guess it never felt that strange. I think as you're growing up, you only gradually develop a sense that this is different from what other children are experiencing. Obviously, everyone has their own things that they're dealing with. And, for example, I remember another school friend of ours, Christopher Coleman. I remember when, because we were at the same first school as well as secondary school, I was going for my flu jab come the autumn. And I was like, yeah, apparently everyone gets it. It's just a good idea. And he was like, what? I don't think I get that. I don't think many other people our age get that. And I was like, yeah, I'm sure you do. That was one of the earliest memories I have of, maybe this does set me apart from other people a little bit. And then, as you get older, you realise that you're taking tablets at lunchtime at school and no one else is. And having, I think it was every 3 months or so, hospital checkups just to do some routine tests, taking a day off school for that. It's a slow dawning realisation that you have this condition. I'm very fortunate to say that when I was younger, it never really got in the way of things too much. And I think there comes a point in everyone's life where they push themselves a bit too hard and they learn the hard way that there are limits. And for me, that was at university. It was one summer. I was performing at the Edinburgh Fringe, doing a show there, and I was also acting in a short film that's being made there. Some problem with the shooting schedule meant that we had to do like a night shoot, and I was outside and it was raining. I was exhausted because the Edinburgh Fringe is a very exhausting thing. You're performing every day for essentially the whole month of August. I was doing a musical too, so singing is that made it even more exhausting than just standing on stage and acting, I guess. A bit of dancing as well. And and then I will routinely send off sputum samples, so I'll spit into a pot and send them off to be analysed if there's anything in there. And I remember the doctor telling me that I'd grown a whole zoo of things, essentially, which I have a strong suspicion was brought on in no small way from being exhausted and doing that night shoot standing in the rain. Very, very prone to infection. And so that was my first wake-up call. I had to go into hospital for 2 weeks for some intravenous antibiotics. And it was tough because I was rehearsing for a role in a show at university, which I was really excited for. The director was amazing, and Helen Eastman, she's going to crop up later in the story as well, let me keep the part. Obviously was rehearsing someone else to stand in just in case I'd have to stay in hospital. But I was able to come out in time and do the role. But it was a lot. It was pretty traumatic to come to that realization, and then a couple of months later had to go back into hospital for something else. And I think you reach a point where it's like, oh, is this just life now? Is that just, the years of hospital checkup every few months and the odd course of just oral antibiotics here and there. Maybe those days are behind us. Maybe now the new future is I stay in hospital every few months or so. Fortunately, thanks to some amazing care, those two ended up being, touch wood, an anomaly, really. And then after university, go to drama school. There's not much to say in the way of CF there. Shortly after drama school, the pandemic hits. COVID-19 is a respiratory affliction. Cystic fibrosis mainly affects the lungs, so every morning I will have to do chest physiotherapy, blowing into mouthpieces just to clear the mucus that's settled in the lungs, because again, that can make you prone to infection.
It must have been really scary, COVID-19, that kind of time.
Yeah. I don't think I appreciated initially quite how much it was affecting me. I think I knew it was a respiratory condition. Yes, I was worried about it. I wasn't, and I still actually, to this day, I don't use my hands to touch doorknobs. I will sort of use my elbow where possible, use any other means. But all of a sudden, hand washing was taking me upwards of 10 minutes. And it's one of those things where you don't realise how far you've plunged into this lack of perspective until something like that happens, and you take a step back and think, oh wow, this really is affecting me more than I realised. Because also, I was actually, COVID-19, the pandemic, was horrendous in all sorts of ways. From my perspective, at first at least, I really appreciated the extra time it gave me in the day. And at that point, and again, we'll be talking about this later, but I was acting. Not really any acting work going on during that time. And so the ability to take a step back and just reconnect with some of the things I enjoyed, like Pokémon, which we'll get to, I actually really enjoyed. But yeah, and then, worst possible timing, over the pandemic, they picked up E. coli in my sputum and decided I needed intravenous antibiotics. But because of the pandemic, I couldn't go to hospital. So I had to do it myself at home. I was with my parents, which was very fortunate. So initially, though, I did have to go out to hospital to receive the kit and do tests and get baseline readings before I started these intravenous antibiotics. Left hospital with, no exaggeration, 2 essentially sort of Father Christmas sacks full of medicine and apparatus and syringes and what have you. I had a line put in my arm, and that was, if my initial hospitalisation that I mentioned was traumatic, this was that to sort of the power of 10. To have to deal with all of that yourself and learning how to do it for the first time. Again, I'm so grateful that my parents were there to help me with it all, because by myself, it just would have been too overwhelming. And I ended up having an allergic reaction to those antibiotics as well, so I couldn't even complete the course, and that had happened with the 2 previous hospitalizations I mentioned. There were issues with, I wasn't tolerating some of the drugs. And so a few days later, I sort of came off them and they let them settle. And the thing with cystic fibrosis is that a lot of the infections you can grow are actually kind of insidious. They're there and they're not necessarily affecting you. But often a doctor will decide better out than in and try and get rid of it, which is understandable. In the case of this E. coli, it really was just there. It wasn't really doing anything. The doctor still thought, let's try and get rid of it, but it didn't work. But fortunately, they were happy enough to let it lie. And at the same time, just before the pandemic, whereas I'm monologuing here, but I guess this is the point of the podcast. So,
Please do.
Just before the pandemic, I was doing a short film in Italy. It was very cool to be shooting there, set in the Renaissance, about the plague, strangely enough, just as COVID-19 was beginning to become a thing. And so it was weird. It was literally as I was in the air that northern Italy was declared, the European epicenter of the pandemic at the time. Took off, didn't hear anything about it. You land and you're greeted by people in hazmat suits taking your temperature. It was like the world had changed in midair. Now, that coincidence of making a plague film as a real-life plague was happening did get the film some press attention. It wouldn't have got otherwise, but fundamentally, all of the film festivals were cancelled, so it ended up not working out for the best for the film. But through doing that film, I met my now partner, Sarah. the joke I like to say is that her character in the film she had the plague, so she had these prosthetic like pustules and bunions all over her. The joke I like to make is, and then she put her makeup on. But she was wonderful, and yeah, I think, very shortly after that, everything went into lockdown. And again, because the world was so unprepared for what was coming, we landed back at Heathrow, and the advice was very much like, you can self-isolate if you want, but up to you, if only the world knew what was coming. And because that was the most recent group I spent time with, we've all had that experience. It became the group you do the lockdown quizzes with. So weekly, we'd have these lockdown quizzes. She's an incredible quiz writer. And I think there was one event where it just happened to be just me and her turning up to one of these Zoom things. And so it, unbeknownst to us, became sort of our first online dating in the age of Corona. And at that point, I'm like, oh, wow, I haven't been in a relationship for a very long time. And I like this girl a lot. I want to impress her. And then I got landed with this E. coli and having to go on intravenous antibiotics. And I was worried about scaring her off. And it was all a lot. And it paved the way for the one-man show that I wrote. And I will pause there in case you have anything else you want to catch up on before I move on to that.
No, absolutely. No, that's a phenomenal story. And thank you so much for sharing it, because it's I think a great privilege sometimes when I don't have sort of these kind of health conditions or any sort of points, because I've never had to think about ever my lungs or how I eat. I just tend to eat a bit too much, as most people can tell. That's kind of it. So hearing your story, I kind of had I was trying to listen quite carefully, because of course we went to secondary school together. I was trying to think. I knew you had that cystic fibrosis, but maybe I think I heard you talk about it a little bit for once or twice, and then it was quite normalized.
Yeah.
But obviously your journey, as you just articulated, is anything but. But you have to go through it, because it's genetic. It's something that's not going to be cured. Something you live with. And your show is a great illumination of your journey. Once that the wonder drug came through, which we'll touch on. But absolutely fine to monologue, because it's amazing that I think back to my childhood and think about how I've grown up, and health is one of those things that you assume it's there until it's not.
Yeah,
and that's when it becomes something to focus on, and as you say, be in hospital. So it's remarkable that you've gone through that journey, and live with it. Because to someone like me, listen to it, I have to take a pill every time I want to eat something. I'd have to do a whole bunch of things to manage the condition. And you hope that obviously medicine gets better, which is the wonder drug, but at the same time you still have to take it and live through it and deal with it. And I'm sitting here being like, well, the biggest health issue I've ever had is probably a broken finger or broken arm or something. It's not really. I was in a cast for 2-3 weeks, and no, we were just talking about your journey and your story, and it's just naturally hearing that you compare childhoods, right? Because we virtually had a very similar one certainly at secondary school. Just out of curiosity, I know our school was pretty good. It didn't have anyone that made sort of terrible comments. We had no school bullies, from what I remember. They were very good. But did you ever feel that at school you were uncomfortable with the condition? Did anyone ever make you, not to name names, but was it something that you just it was part of you, and everyone went, yeah, it's part of Charlie, that's fine, we still love him?
Yeah, I think but again, at that point I was very much like, cystic fibrosis wasn't really to the fore. I barely talked about it at school, I don't think, because it just wasn't relevant and it never came up. And I'm very fortunate to be able to say that, cystic fibrosis affects different people in different ways. I was talking to you before, Rohit, about it's only, with a bit of distance, thinking back to the fact that we did study cystic fibrosis as, a module or something as part of GCSE biology. I remember that our teacher sort of, when introducing this topic, said, okay, so for the next couple of weeks or however long, we're going to learn a bit about cystic fibrosis, a genetic disease, and one of the class, how's that? And that was me. And it's you know, at the time you're just school age and you're just going through it, and it's like, yes, I do, and now we learn about it, and that's fine. But looking back, with the benefit of hindsight and considering, oh yeah, for that teacher, a big responsibility to, you know, keep things in perspective, you know, potentially learning things about the condition that I wish I hadn't known at the time. And she has a responsibility to be very delicate about that. But, you know, other than that, no, I don't think that cystic fibrosis really came up. I mean, if I went away with friends, yeah, I'd bring my physio equipment with me and do physio in the morning and in the evening. Yeah, I mean, all my friends were very encouraging. They wouldn't be my friends if they weren't, I suppose. But yeah.
I'm sort of semi-proud to hear that, because I think I could easily hear, and I'm sure you've met plenty of people that have had that condition, haven't gone through a pleasant experience.
Well, it's interesting you said that, actually, because actually people with cystic fibrosis aren't meant to meet in person. There's a risk of cross-infection, yeah. So I know of people online, but actually the number of people I've met in person with cystic fibrosis, it would only really ever be by accident. And I think it's around 11,000 people in the UK have cystic fibrosis, maybe around 100,000 globally. Don't quote me on that, but I think those are the rough numbers. So yeah, I've probably over the course of life have crossed paths with someone with CF without ever even realising it. But yeah, I wasn't surrounded by it. But I think this is I kind of quite like that. I'm glad that cystic fibrosis wasn't too much a part of my upbringing. I'm glad that it hasn't. Life hasn't found a way of letting me be defined by my cystic fibrosis, and I think that's a testament also to the way my parents have raised me. The fact that, you know, I am as complex a human being as anyone else, first and foremost, and then cystic fibrosis is part of that. Obviously, something to take seriously, but just keep things in perspective. And I think had I not had that kind of upbringing, then potentially writing a show about all of this and my experiences would have been too close to the bone and maybe too difficult to come to terms with. But yeah, something you've alluded to, Rohit, is the fact that a game-changing medicine came around called Kaftrio over here in the UK. So, as I said before, cystic fibrosis, disorder of cell membranes, salt and water can't pass through as they should between the cells. What Kaftrio does is regulate those cell gateways. So the salt and water can pass through in the normal way. That means my bodily secretions are not thicker than they should be. That means that it's hard for bacteria to settle, which is a massive breakthrough, because that essentially corrects the underlying cause of cystic fibrosis. Again, don't quote me on that, but to all intents and purposes, that's sort of what it seems to do. And so while I'm on that, it's as close to not having cystic fibrosis as things can be, really. And now they've hit upon this medicine, you know, it seems like they can now just refine this and optimize it even further. And this also came around in lockdown. I think it was December 2020. And, you know, I was in a pretty rough point at that time. I started speaking to a CF psychologist, again, all online because of the pandemic. And I think, I don't know, this medicine had been hailed for a few years now, and it was finally here. But I think because everything else was weighing on me so much, it wasn't really that hopeful. I guess I didn't want to get my hopes up. But you take it, and then I think it was only 24 hours where there was a bit of, maybe a bit of, I don't know, felt like my sinuses were a bit clogged, and I was coughing up more than usual during physio because it was the medicine getting to work and clearing stuff out. And then 24 hours later, or maybe 48, I remember waking up and taking a breath and thinking, this is what breathing is supposed to feel like. It's an experience that plenty of other people have had since they were born and take for granted, but it was only when I was able to take a breath, having been on Kaftrio, that I realised actually my breathing before had been, laboured is too strong, but that little bit more difficult. You can just feel stuff that you need to clear just through breathing in and constantly clearing your throat. For the first time, I could laugh without coughing as well. It was unbelievable. And you know, a once in a lifetime thing, really. I'm very, very fortunate indeed to have been born when I was, from that perspective. And I have this really a perspective that only very, very minute percentage of people in the world would have for any condition, really, in that I had lived up to that point around 30 years of my life without Kaftrio, without this sensation of breathing normally and just feeling more normal, really. And then the sensation with it. It feels like almost two parallel lives. And as I said, pandemic, no acting opportunities going around. I had a lot to deal with psychologically over the pandemic from everything I've been saying. As the restrictions start to lift, it had always been in the back of my mind to write something that I could perform to do with cystic fibrosis, because we barely see it portrayed in the media. And it just felt like the right time. And, you know, whether most of it was just like I had a lot of stuff to process, I don't know. But yeah, I think it was late 2021 that I thought, okay, New Year's resolution, I'm going to commit to writing a one-man show. And it was called Wonder Drug, a comedy about cystic fibrosis. I realise that stuff I have said so far wouldn't suggest it would be a comedy. But another big aspect of what I wanted to do was do exactly that, create a comedy about a health narrative, because so often stories about health fall into that trap of just being solemn and focusing too much on the condition. But that can also be pretty dehumanizing. It's reducing people to just the condition. I am someone who's always enjoyed comedy. I like laughter. I think it's when we're at our best, is when we're laughing together, sharing good times. And so I wanted to humanize, in my case, cystic fibrosis, but what I found from people who saw the show was that actually it did resonate, and this was my hope, with people with all kinds of health conditions. I think you have to write a story about something pretty specific for it to land more widely, because if it's too generalized, then no one can really connect with it. So the story was all about how, life is good. I've just met this girl, Sarah, and I really like her. But then the pandemic happens. That's not great. Oh, and then I have to go on intravenous antibiotics. Oh, and then I'm allergic to them. Is there going to be a cure? And then the wonder drug, Kaftrio, comes along. And it was so. I mentioned before Helen Eastman, who was the director of the play that I was going to be doing at university when I had to go into hospital for the first time, but she let me keep my role, and she was amazing about it, and I did the show, and it was great. There was no one else in my mind that I wanted to direct my show other than her, because I remember when I was told you have to go into hospital for 2 weeks, and it was right smack bang in the middle of rehearsals, I then had to go back to rehearsals and tell her what the deal was, and potentially I wouldn't be able to do the show. And I remember going into that rehearsal room, and she was like, oh, how was your appointment? Was everything okay? And I was like, I need to talk to you. And she was like, is everything okay? And I could only say again, I need to talk to you. So we went off to a separate room, and I told her, and I broke down in tears, and she was so understanding about it and amazing. So she had that experience, just limited, but that experience with me of how cystic fibrosis was affecting me. And she came in, and I've always loved creative writing. I loved writing the show. The first draft I did was very much a science lecture, essentially, which no one wants to watch. But basically, my perspective was, no one wants to hear about little old me. They want to learn about this condition that we never hear about, which to some extent is true, but you got to have the spoonful of sugar that helps the medicine go down. And so that's where much more of the personal storyline of me and Sarah came through. She, at the time, and still, was compiling this massive playlist of 80s music on Spotify, which both of us love, and that formed the soundtrack to the show. I have Billy Ocean in there when the going gets tough, Fleetwood Mac everywhere, and I rewrote the lyrics to Holding Out for a Hero by Bonnie Tyler to Holding Out for Kaftrio. And we gamified. The idea was that I was watching too much lockdown TV, and so like the sequence where I put my intravenous antibiotics equipment together for the first time, and it was insane. The hospital had said, just watch this video and it'll tell you everything you need to know. It's true, but the video is like half an hour long, and it's like, wash your hands, and now wipe this, and then when you've done that, screw that on, and just follow these easy steps, and it is not easy at all. That became like a Crystal Maze-inspired sequence of like, oh, but the needles are over there, and the syringe is over there, I have to do it in a certain time. There was a blind date sequence where the audience meets my antibiotics, the cocktail of antibiotics that I'm on. There was even an X Factor sequence where you've got singing syringes full of antibiotics, and they're auditioning to be the one to sort of treat me. And it was it turned out to be essentially exactly the show that I wanted it to be, and the heart at the core of it was the fact that I was worried about what Sarah might think of all that's going on. It was a new relationship, and but of course she was very understanding, and it was all just me sort of just spiraling in my head, and so we made that show. I performed it in London at the Vault Festival. I don't think the Vault Festival is running any longer, which is very sad. But I'm very grateful to them for the opportunity to perform it there. And then it moved to a pub theatre in London for 2 weeks. And then the ultimate aim was always to take it to the Edinburgh Fringe, which I did with a couple of previews in London before that as well. And the Edinburgh Fringe, I mentioned it before, but it runs for the whole of August. And I decided to perform for the whole of August, performing the show essentially every day. I think I gave myself 3 days off over the course of it. And again, with cystic fibrosis, I've got to be careful not to exhaust myself too much, because that, again, would make me more prone to infection. And got really good reviews. Audiences really liked it. And again, because people with cystic fibrosis aren't supposed to meet, had it filmed so that it could be broadcast online, because of course the primary people I wanted to see it and who would benefit from it hopefully would be those with cystic fibrosis. So the whole thing is now on YouTube, available to watch. It's Wonder Drug, a comedy about cystic fibrosis.
And we'll put a link on that in our description, so everyone can take a look and watch an amazing show.
Yeah, well, that's very kind of you. Don't speak too soon. You might hate it. But thanks very much. I was really pleased with how it went. What I realised, though, over the course of doing it, and so it's about cystic fibrosis, but it's also about the relationship between physical and mental health, which is something that isn't talked about enough as well, I don't think. The relationship between doctor and patient as well, and how things that a doctor might say to a patient and not bat an eyelid about really sit with it. If they will make an offhand comment about like how your progressive lung disease, and not think anything of it, which cystic fibrosis is, but the term progressive lung disease is a lot for anyone to deal with, especially when they have that condition themselves. And so it's just, a name of the show was never to, rally in any significant way. It's just making the point that just think twice when you're talking to someone about their health and just the effect your words might have on them. Fundamentally, the aim of the show was to show that people with medical conditions or whatever they might be dealing with are people first and foremost, and patients secondary to that. Being referred to as a patient, again, it's one of those things that's quite dehumanizing. And I'm pleased with what the show presented in that light. But I tell you what, doing a show essentially every day for an entire month about something that's very personal to you takes an emotional toll. And by the end of August, I was like, okay, I need a bit of distance from this now. And of course, bound up in what I've just said is my love of acting and writing, which I'm sure we're about to get into. But so I'm very proud to have put that out into the world. And I hope that it's helped people with cystic fibrosis or any condition they may have to feel like more of a person and feel, or if they are in a point in life where they're feeling a bit dehumanized, just hopefully be able to put that in the background and have a bit of a laugh. I think, again, I said spoonful of sugar helps medicine go down. That also applies to, I think you've got to make people laugh about something first before they can connect with it on a deep level, because a surefire way of making an audience switch off is just by hitting them over the head with emotional stuff for an hour. I have to emphasize as well that, Kaftrio hasn't had the same effect on everyone. I've been one of the very lucky ones where it's had a really positive effect, but some people had a much harder time coming to terms with it. But so my heart goes out to those people, and yeah. But I'm proud of what I've done, and
you should be. I mean, it's a gift you've given to the world. Where
thanks
for. As long as YouTube exists, which I'm sure will be for decades and decades, people that want to learn about cystic fibrosis, that have CF, that want to watch an amazing show, they'll be able to look at that. So
thanks. Yeah.
So thank you.
Thank you.
Listening to you, there are a couple of things that I find fascinating, but one thing that I think is really important. It's really important to me anyway. So I'm going to be selfish here. Is that a lot of the touch points that you've mentioned throughout, actually, since the start of the podcast, is the care that you've received in the UK and the NHS and the doctors and nurses and all the professionals that supported you, and at a time when it's coming under significant scrutiny, and people are criticising it, some rightly, some wrongly. I think it's really important that we highlight the wonderful stories behind the NHS, and forgive me if I'm overstepping, but from what I'm hearing from you, you had a wonderful journey with them, and they looked after you, and even during something like COVID, when it was extremely challenging, they gave you your Santa Claus sacks of gifts, and I know that wasn't the smoothest journey, but the fact that they accommodated you, and the fact that we have a structure in the UK where you didn't have to pay thousands and thousands, or probably tens of thousands, maybe even hundreds of thousands of pounds for all of the medicine you had for the last 30 plus years.
Thank you for bringing that up.
It's wonderful.
I'm very glad you did, because you're so right. It's something that we cannot take for granted. It's scary times in the world as a whole right now, but including for the NHS, and it doesn't really bear thinking about where I might be and where so many people might be if that care hadn't been in place. And I have received wonderful care, be it at Southampton General Hospital or Papworth in Cambridge. I went to university at Cambridge, and so I then transferred care over to Cambridge. Let's all do what we can to protect the NHS.
Oh, absolutely, and it's just wonderful to hear that. Again, I'm not comparing stories, but when I've broken arms, and actually both of them, I think, thumbs, and playing cricket, and did my ACL, the NHS has been wonderful. And yes, does it take a bit longer to get a GP appointment? Of course, because those people use the service. But at the same time, whenever I've needed it, it's been there. And I think it's important to highlight that sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for bringing it up.
And the second thing is the kindness of people.
Yeah.
I talk about this a lot with entrepreneurs, with my clients, with anyone I try to meet. That a lot of people ask me, what's a skill set that you see in very successful entrepreneurs, and they often go, "What's the three big things?" Now I always flirt with the third, but I'm trying being consistent with two. And the first one is kindness, because the most successful clients I've ever met, my clients that are, if you want to define them as financially successful, the multimillionaires, the billionaires, they're often very, very nice people. And kindness is often the four. It doesn't necessarily mean they're generous. It doesn't necessarily mean they give money whenever they want to. It's not financial kindness. It is personal kindness. It's as a human being, how they treat people, how they act. And the second thing, just to complete it, is sense of humour. I think that's very important as an entrepreneur, because it's a roller coaster ride, and it's and you need to be able to enjoy the ride at some point. But where I'm going with this is that the lovely director, is it Helena?
Helen Eastman.
Helen Eastman.
Yeah.
Helen Eastman. Shout out to Helen. Love to meet you one day, because you sound wonderful, and your act of kindness was obviously instrumental to you, Charlie, for that taking that step back during the show. I'm sure she was quite stressed and worried about how the show would go forward, and you were obviously very instrumental. But showing you that kindness and giving you 2-3 weeks off, and allowing you to manage what you need to manage and come back and obviously nail the play, I think is something that needs to be acknowledged. Because as we again, we talk. I mean, lots of people that watch the show would know through other people's entrepreneurial journeys. It's often those few people that were quite kind, that a lot of people refer to it as giving them that break or that opportunity. Sometimes it's just saying, "Don't worry, Charlie, we'll handle it. We'll crack on. When you're back, we'll reshoot and we'll crack on from there." So I think it's wonderful to hear that you've had those people that have been kind to you, because those are obviously quite formative to your journey thereafter. And of course, Helen in particular was the director for your show, and I think you played it down a little bit, because the reviews at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival, certainly the ones I read, were this is one of the best shows they've ever had. And that's why I call it a gift, because it's phenomenal. Even if you have no connection to CF, just watch it, because it's an amazing show.
Thank you. That's very kind of you. Yeah. I mean, as I say, I think a show has to be something about very specific to then be applied more widely and register with more people. But I was pleased with how it went, and you're absolutely right. I think so often going through life, there'll be things that you want to try out, like now, and we'll get into this later, but I'm leading into content creation. And sometimes all it takes is someone who's doing that, to say to you, oh yeah, let me show you the ropes, to make you feel like you can do it. If you don't have that initial sort of offer of a hand, offer of help, who knows, maybe you'd never take that step, and then that whole avenue that could have been very successful and very make you very happy could be shut off to you. Helen, it's very, very fortunate to have worked with her. I think, there's in the industry there are directors who will be far more, understandably to some extent, but focused perhaps too much on the end result. But Helen had that awareness that we're at university. It's a big deal. It's a university, a very formative experience. So to be able to allow me that, and then the fact that she was so willing to be involved in obviously what was a very personal show, Wonder Drug, again, absolutely formative. And who knows, if I hadn't worked with her, maybe Wonder Drug wouldn't have come to be. But yeah, as I say, I think it's all about that initial offer of help that then could just make someone thrive.
Agreed. Right, so we've spoken about your incredible show that was at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival. Let's go back a little bit to 2011 or so. You finished your A-levels. Yeah. And you're ready to go to the University of Cambridge. You studied classics, which is forgive me. Yeah. What is it? Why is it relevant?
Right. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. You warned me this would come up. So, this is. I now see this as like my sales pitch to you of classics. Oh. So, classics is the study of the ancient Greek and Roman worlds. That means learning the languages, Latin and ancient Greek. That means reading the literature that was put out, and a phenomenal output. It means studying ancient history. It means studying the philosophy of the ancients. It means studying ancient art and archaeology. And it means studying linguistics and the way that languages evolve, as well as plenty of other things, taking a more multidisciplinary perspective as well. I had some phenomenal teachers at Merchant Taylors, where you and I both were. Shout out to the Merchant Taylors Classics department at the time. Really ignited my passion. I've always, I think, when we get to talking about Pokémon, this will be a part of it as well. The escapism it provided, and just looking at worlds that seem so foreign to ours, and yet there are so many similarities, so many things we identify as just human nature. Essentially, Rohit, all of those things I said, I studied, and classics is the ultimate, I would say, arts degree, because you're not just studying history, you're not just studying literature, you're studying them all, which gives you a really broad toolkit, things to apply to future life. So I believe classics degrees are highly sought after by employers for that reason. Because you get such a thorough grounding in all of those different ways of thinking and all of those different backgrounds. Essentially, that's what classics is.
That sounds wild.
Yeah. I don't. It's not wild in like the sense of the student lifestyle, but it's wild in terms of the breadth of what you study, for sure. And Latin and ancient Greek, they're not spoken these days, but learning how those ancient languages work and that are the basis of. I've just noticed what Tanya's picked up there as well. You've got a little bit of Pokémon merchandise there.
Oh, yes, I do. Yes, we do. We'll bring that out later.
Having that basis in how those ancient languages work, that are the ancestor of so many modern languages in the West, it means that I feel I can pick up modern languages far more quickly, because I know how those much more complex languages. I know the building blocks of them, so that foundation is laid, and so there's that aspect of it as well.
I mean, I think speaking slightly more formally, a bit more respectfully, I think you're absolutely right. Classics degrees are very highly sought after degree holders. Either they move into law, which I think a lot of friends that did study classics have moved into that side of the world, or just generally academically, those courses are taught at some of the better universities, the Russell Groups, the Cambridges. So just the academic ability is quite impressive. So employers see that as a great signal. So I studied philosophy, politics, and economics. So multifaceted. But yeah, I think classics would probably nudge me on that one. The only thing I would say, it's a bit more modern than ancient Greek and Latin, if you don't mind me saying.
No, well, yeah, no, I certainly don't mind you saying that because it's true. But I know what you mean, but again, like I feel very lucky to have studied it. Classics, Latin and ancient Greek, they're not subjects that are that widely available, and I think fewer and fewer schools will be teaching them because of exactly that mindset you just said. You know, what's the point in studying dead languages and dead civilizations? But yeah, I hope to fly the flag and get it taught more broadly because, you know, I loved it. I benefited hugely from it, and I know plenty of other people have. But I mean, that's just the path that I took, and yeah, you'd have plenty to teach me, and people who've taken their own diverse paths, of course, the same. But yeah, so I think at Cambridge, I guess where we're heading with this is the drama scene that was going on there.
Well, just before we get into that, because you're absolutely right. That's super exciting. But just I think, if you don't mind me saying, we're very fortunate to go to a wonderful school like Merchant Taylor's, which had some great resources, great teachers, teachers that certainly inspired me to do more than I thought I was capable of. Certainly, so the teachers expect the best, but also guide you to get there. So, I have massive thank you to that school.
Repeat, yeah, agreed.
Absolutely, and getting into Cambridge, obviously, people know that's one of the best universities in the world. It's an elite university. How did you feel when you got that letter and then you went to Cambridge and did you feel like, okay, I'm at the best place in the world to study generally?
I mean, I don't think I was thinking about it like that. I just, I knew I wanted to study classics. As we say, fewer and fewer places teach those. So Oxford and Cambridge would be top of the list in that regard, I guess. And yeah, I preferred what the classics course at Cambridge offered to what the course at Oxford offered. Both incredible, obviously. And I did, I worked very hard for it, like millions of drafts of my personal statement that I went through, for example. I remember, I was thinking about this on the way in, actually. I remember saying to some of the classics teachers, do you mind giving me a quick mock interview over the lunch break or whatever so I can practice? And they were more than happy to. So again, shout out to the incredible staff and teachers at Merchant Taylor's for being so willing to help their students like that. And then, I remember going out. You have to do an interview in person, of course, as well. I remember going up. I applied to Queen's College, Cambridge, for various factors. It was one of the bigger colleges, I think. I don't know, on the open day, I liked the vibe there. But I went up, did my interviews there, did backup interviews at the second college. And I remember getting back and just flopping on the sofa and playing this ridiculous game called Snail Mail on my phone, where you're like this turbocharged snail in space that is delivering mail and like doing loop-the-loops and you can't fall off the course or whatever. And it just felt amazing because I had worked so hard towards it. And then when the letter came through, I really didn't know what to expect. But it was the acceptance, and it was such a relief because I worked so hard towards it, and if I hadn't been accepted, it would have been fine. But it was just the cherry on top and made all the hard work feel worthwhile.
Amazing. And when you got to Cambridge and you were with your fellow Queen's College students, was there a sense of sort of, I've arrived and I'm in a great place, or was it just, I'm going to university and studying classics?
It's so I arrived at Cambridge, and you have Freshers' Week, as you do in most universities. However, the powers that be wanted to rename Freshers' Week Academic Alignment Week, because they thought it was it was far more the vibe that Cambridge was going for. And I think probably my Freshers' Week experience was pretty different from the Freshers' Week experiences of others. I remember 3 weeks into my course, Terms at Cambridge are pretty short and intense. They're 8 weeks long. So yeah, we started in October, finished in December. 3 weeks into my term, Jamie Ells, another friend of ours from Hudson Taylor's, we had a FaceTime to catch up. He went to Exeter. He had been there for 5 weeks total at that point, so he started 2 weeks earlier than me. And so we were catching up. It was great to see him. And then at one point he goes, "Oh, mate, it's terrible." And I'm like, "What is it?" "I've been set my first essay." By this point I've done 3, because we did an essay a week. So I'm like, I have no sympathy, but continue. And he goes, "The worst part is, it's not even a full essay. It's a plan, but I have to write out the introduction in full." I nearly hung up then and there. Because again, I'm just so used to churning out these essays at this point. And he was complaining to me about being set his first, and it's not even a proper essay, and he's 5 weeks in. So yeah, I think the ethos, the amount you work and so on is different at Cambridge. And again, short and intense. It feels like a pressure cooker for those 8 weeks, and then you're released into the holidays, and you have a bit of freedom, you have a bit of time to find your feet. And by the time you've done that, you're right back into another term. It's also a great leveler. I think, if you're going to a university like that, probably in your year at school, you're one of the most proficient at that subject. And then I get to Cambridge, and you realise within like the first week or two, the ones that are destined to be academics, and I saw those people, flying high, and they seem to already know everything we were learning, and I'm like, how I don't know how you've done this. We're learning this for the first time now. And I'm like, you know what? I'm fine with that. I'm fine with not being the absolute top of the class anymore. I'm really enjoying my time at Cambridge, and a large part of that was the extracurricular drama that I was doing. And so, yeah, obviously I will do as best I can. I did do well, but I think there are some people who take that transition much harder, like the expectation of, I have been one of the top in the school at XYZ subject, and now I'm not anymore because I'm in a year full of people who were also top in their schools for whatever subject they did. But yeah, I think for me it was hey-ho, we keep going.
No, I mean, it's probably the most common thing that a lot of people who went to elite universities say, is that that transition of, I was in the US, they call it valedictorian. Here it just, you're awesome, and then you go into university and it's like everyone is awesome, and it's like, who's the most awesome? And it's incredible. And I went to the University of York to study PP, and one of our tutors, she was brilliant. She was one of the foremost sort of practical philosophers in the country, specialised in representative democracy, and just her brain was just unbelievable. Yeah. And managed to have a one-on-one chat with her during one of her sort of surgeries or tutors. I don't know if this is the same at Cambridge, but for York anyway, each of our tutors would have had like a couple of hours every week that you could just turn up and pick their brain on anything. Didn't take it up, if I'm honest, with every tutor. But because she was known as this phenomenal practical philosopher, and that was something I thoroughly enjoyed about my degree, like the intersections of economics, philosophy, and economics, economics, philosophy, and politics. That when you've got someone who is quite literally genius, you pick their brain. And she went to Cambridge. I think she did a PhD at Cambridge as well. And I asked her, what's the difference between like someone like York, which was Russell Group, it was all right, it's pretty solid,
absolutely,
but Cambridge, and she said, look, amongst all the Russell Group universities, you'll have your very good students. People generally are good standard. Like, no one's, maybe there's the odd one that's you kind of realise why you're here, but most people are good. But the difference at the Cambridge and Oxfords of the world is that the exceptional students, the top 5%, are truly exceptional. They are geniuses. They are the best of the best, and that's the difference. So if you wanted to feel better about going to a Russell Group university, you are in good company. But at the elite level, there are those exceptions, and that's what she said. Look, don't feel bad. It is what it is. And it was quite nice, because at our school, obviously the teachers push you and you try to do the best, and they never made us feel like if you didn't get into the elite universities that you're not academically strong. They never did that. They were wonderful. At the same time, they made us understand why it was important to do that. to then motivate yourself to obviously get there. And I've always wondered, if I went back and maybe did a master's, I probably a much better academic now than I was at the A levels.
Yeah.
Far too sort of on the cricket field and running around a little bit too much. I probably should have studied like a good boy. But it's always interesting to hear, if you've worked, if you've operated, if you studied at the elite level, what does that mean? Yeah. And to a lot of other friends that have been to Oxford and Cambridge, it was everything. Right. They poured their heart and soul into it. Yeah. To others, it was very much, it was the best at what I did, and I just went for it and got lucky. For others, it was just my dad did it, his dad did it, my mum did it, her mum did it, and so I just kind of had to do it. And then when you go to a place like York, where there was the Russell Group universities tend to be that spill off, second choices, third choices. People really wanted to get into Oxford and Cambridge, and it was an intriguing journey. There were definitely a couple of people in our year that were phenomenal, and they dropped out of York, and they were like, "No, we're going to go for Oxford and Cambridge again." At first, I wasn't. That's a bit harsh. What's wrong with York? But because they were so focused on that elite journey, where I'm heading with this is that it's. I think it's always important to strive for the best. I think you try and get to the top of whatever you do, but if you don't get there, it's just part of your journey.
Exactly.
It's not like it's not, you don't have to stop your life to go and, try and achieve this one thing. Yeah. It's a phenomenal achievement. Mad respect for anyone that has achieved it, for sure. Yeah. Very happy to say that person is more academically gifted and better than myself. That's not a problem. But at the same time, it's just, that's their journey. That's cool. Let them do that. Yeah. You do you. But it's part of who you are. It's not everything.
Yeah, I think life has a way of... I sometimes you just have to go with the flow. So, if something doesn't happen for you that you really wanted, in the moment it sucks, but maybe ultimately it's just not meant to be, and it will end up paving the way for something that is far more to your liking. So, totally.
Yeah, absolutely. And entrepreneurship, we always talk about sort of like the power of failure and I don't know if elevating, getting into... I went to Oxford because PP is famous at Oxford. And I didn't get in. And you kind of go, well, I failed to get into Oxford, where the pass rate was whatever, in single digits, and the most academic, and because it was quite a famous degree, everyone was talking about politicians going there, and you're going to become prime minister if you do PP at Oxford for some odd reason. Then you can call that a failure, and if you want to sort of design it that way, that's fine. But in my head, and a lot of entrepreneurs' heads, we're just talking about academics, but it could be for anything. It could be the launch of a product, launch of a service, buying a business, running a business, whatever it is. That power of failure, I think, is so fundamental, because then you learn, well, why didn't I do it? I learned why I didn't get there because I didn't study hard enough, frankly. I did enough to kind of be in the mix, but nowhere near enough to get there, and the people that went there, phenomenal. So I know I didn't earn it, but then in my head, now I realise, if I really want something and I really want to go for it, there's no doubt you've got to put in the work. Yep. Luck is a huge element of things. Yeah. Processes are a huge element of things, but sometimes you've got to sit your ass down and just elbow grease something. You've got to get on with it. And learning that, I think, early as possible is fundamental. So it's the audience that listen to this, I think it's important that academically you should strive if that's part of what you want to do, but at the same time learn lessons from if you wanted to go for something, because there are a lot of people trying for universities now, and it's brutal and it's difficult, and the pass rates are lower and the challenges are harder, and of course there's global students to compete with. It's a very, very tough thing, and what I don't want is someone at 18 years old, 17 years old not getting that letter to define the rest of their lives. And it's and you did, I didn't, and that's absolutely fine. But the point is that you learn from that. You learn from your success and going to Cambridge, and we'll talk about the drama element, which has been so formative for you. It's phenomenal. For me, it was like, well, okay, I didn't get it. I got it because I failed and I didn't work hard enough. So now, if I ever want anything, put the hard work in first. Don't worry about excuses. Don't worry about anything else. Got to put the hard work in first. And I know 99.9% of the time, if I want something and I work for it, I get it.
Yeah.
If I didn't work for it,
Yeah.
I didn't get it.
But I think it's also important on that note to bear in mind that even if you do put all that work in and you still don't get it, that's also fine. You did yourself justice by putting all that work in. Again, life might just have another plan. Again, it's going to be gutting in the time, but yeah, onwards and upwards.
Completely. Now, Cambridge is famous for its drama scene. Can you give us a flavour why it's famous?
Yeah. So this is a big reason why my top choice was Cambridge, because I had always enjoyed acting. From the early years, I don't really know. I think it's my dad's dad definitely did amateur dramatics, and so maybe I get it from there. But yeah, I just always enjoyed being on stage, and I think fundamentally just making things accessible and understandable for people, telling a story and letting people in. I mean, right now on this podcast, you're telling people stories. I think there's just something very humanizing about that. So always immerse myself in acting opportunities at school, right through Merchant Tailors as well. And then, yeah, at Cambridge, essentially, as I was saying to you before we were recording, there's just so much theatre going on. If people are unfamiliar, at Cambridge it's split into a collegiate system. There are 30 or so colleges. So you don't apply to the University of Cambridge when you're applying. You apply to a college there. And as I said, I went to Queen's College, Cambridge. And each of those colleges will have its own theatre. There's a main student theatre as well. There's a professional theatre, the Cambridge Arts Theatre, and there are some student productions that happen at that professional theatre. What that means is, you know, upwards of 100 shows in a term. And I would do maybe 2 to 4 shows in a term. So I think in total over the course of my 3 years at Cambridge, I did more than 20. And I loved it. I think it really is the case that there are some people who go to Cambridge because of the drama. They don't really... The subject they've chosen to study is secondary to the fact that they just want to immerse themselves in the scene. And sometimes it works out for them, because Cambridge is also home to the Cambridge Footlights, which is first and foremost a comedy group, but has launched the careers of people who have gone on to have stellar careers outside of comedy, just in acting. Hugh Laurie, Stephen Fry, Emma Thompson, to name a few of them. And so it's a buzzing and thriving scene to be a part of. It can be quite, you know, it's definitely intense. You can sort of start to put too much self-worth in that acting scene. But I was not one of the people who put all their eggs in the acting basket. I also really enjoyed my degree. I considered further study at one point. Maybe I will at some point in the future. So really, my time at Cambridge over those 3 years was split between doing plays and also doing my degree. And the socialising, that came from the people I was hanging out with during rehearsals and the plays, the cast of the plays that I did. I could probably count on one hand the number of times I went clubbing at university, and I'm fine with that. I really enjoy I love music, I really enjoy dancing, but something's got to give. And especially as I became increasingly aware of the care I had to take on myself with cystic fibrosis, I think, you know, making sure I was also getting enough sleep and so on was crucially important too. So yeah, I really immersed myself, and it's a very inspiring thing to be a part of.
Slight segue.
Yeah.
Can you drink if you have CF?
Yeah. I think as I was saying to you before, I think for cystic fibrosis, before Kaftrio came along, it was encouraged for people with cystic fibrosis to have a high-fat diet, because we tend to absorb less from the food that we eat. However, when Kaftrio came along, now people on Kaftrio tend to absorb more from the food they eat. So doctors have had to go from... I know you really enjoy puddings now, but unfortunately you can't get away with eating so many if you want to maintain a healthy lifestyle. So yeah, there aren't dietary restrictions. If anything, it's encouraged to maybe eat some more of the things that generally people are encouraged not to eat as much. But yeah, you can certainly drink. There are no restrictions in that sense. Although one strange thing is that with Kaftrio, you are meant to be careful about... I remember the doctors sitting me down and telling me this, and I was like, oh my goodness, am I never going to be able to eat bread or milk again, or something very fundamental? And they were like, listen, Charlie, with Kaftrio, you shouldn't eat grapefruit or Seville oranges. And I was like, I think I can do that. I think we'll be okay. Even though I love marmalade. But you can get, and Seville oranges normally form the base of marmalade, but you can get marmalade that is not made with Seville oranges. And grapefruit, I never liked too much anyway. But that sort of side note on Kaftrio aside, your diet can be whatever you would like it to be.
So whizzing back, so we're at University of Cambridge, 2011 to 2014, and then you went to drama school.
Yes. So I think one way of getting good at something is by doing it a lot. And I was doing a lot of acting at Cambridge, and I had some nice roles in that time. I think, having said that, I graduated from Cambridge, and I think I just needed to let the dust settle a bit. It was all a bit much. I think my head was a bit scrambled. I'd done so much acting, I didn't actually know if I wanted to commit to it. So I just really appreciated graduating and just chilling for a bit over that summer. And then come the new sort of academic year, I started tutoring a bit. I started tutoring people in classics, helping people apply to Oxford and Cambridge for classics and helping with their personal statement, and as well as a broad range of students. Trying little bits and bobs like that. And then it was when I did an internship that spring, so around spring 2015 this would have been, in brand design consultancy, which as far as internships go, fairly creative stuff. That's, it's definitely inspiring. And even so, 4 days in, I was like, this is fine. Great, this is fine. But I don't think I want to do fine for my life. I want to do something that I really, really, really want to do. And that's always stuck with me and definitely paved the way for doing Pokémon now. While I was doing that internship, I then looked into applying for drama schools, and decided that over the course of the next academic year, so 2015 to 16, I would apply to drama schools. And I did that. I got into the London Academy of Music and Dramatic Art, or LAMDA, in London. It was a 2-year master's course. And yeah, I mean, at the audition, there are various stages. I mean, part of it is monologues that you prepared. Part of it is group work, seeing how you all work together. Interviews, of course, as well. At the group stage of my my final round audition, one of the exercises we had to do was be air. A-I-R. Just be air. What is air? Embody air. It's one of those things where at the time you're so in it that you go with the flow. And a big part of drama school is that, like, just go for it and see what you learn, rather than taking a step back and sort of laughing at how preposterous that is, because obviously it is a little bit preposterous. So we're all there just wafting around, and clearly I did a good job of acting as air, because then I got into LAMDA. There was another class where we had to pretend to be moss. Imagine that you're moss on a log. And it was in that moment that I thought, it makes sense that I am paying for the experience of being at drama school at 11 a.m. on a Wednesday or whatever, while friends of mine are working very hard, earning their keep. I get to pretend to be moss on mid-morning on a Wednesday. I'm obviously sort of downplaying things, doing it a disservice, because again, you just have to go to these places and see if they're useful. I think certainly from my experience anyway, what I found, a myth about drama school is that they break you down and then build you back up and sort of mould you in the image that they want you to be. But certainly my experience at LAMDA was very much more, let's get to the essence of you. It's not so much breaking down, it's just stripping back all of the years of putting on whatever kind of show you're putting on, or the front that you're presenting to the world. Let's get to sort of the core of you, and then once we've done that, then we know how to sort of tweak aspects of you to play different characters. A lot of movement work, a lot of voice work, singing as well. We did stage combat, all sorts of techniques to help you pretend to be other people, essentially. It was far more a case, as I say, of learning who you fundamentally are, rather than trying to be a million different people at once, which is a very humanizing experience.
I can imagine. And I can see why we're quite different people. Because if someone told me be air, I would tell them to So pretty strong. I would walk out the room. What are you talking about? Or moss. I would go, what? Where do I start? Just give me a spreadsheet. That's fascinating. I mean, you touched on stage combat.
Yeah.
Because as you saw when you walked into our home, we were watching a little bit of Avengers.
Yeah.
A bit of Marvel. So when I don't know if this is what you did, but I'm just picturing someone punching another actor.
Yeah,
How
sure.
does that? Is there actual physical contact? Is it sort of a light punch?
So a little known fact is that I actually play Iron Man in the Marvel films.
Oh.
That's where the combat training to me was amazing. It's all sorts. It's not just fists. It's swords as well, shields too. Also, even found objects you can choreograph a scene with, like you pick up a chain or I don't know, a folder even in your. The idea is that, for example, with a punch, there'd be no contact. That it would be too risky to actually make any kind of contact because it could end up being harder than you're anticipating. But at the same time as you do this, you're hitting your chest, so it looks like, and obviously the person has to sell it. So if I did that to you, you'd have to do that. But yeah, and then with swords, a big thing at LAMDA was eye contact. You maintain eye contact at all times. Actually more dangerous to look where your sort of opponent's sword is going, for example, than it is to look into their eyes, because it makes you lose concentration and then something could hit you. But it's choreographed routines. It's very much, it's like dance. It's a step forward with your right foot as you jab while the other person twists away to their right, and then they have an opening where they can come around like that. So you go through it sort of in minute detail, very slowly, multiple times, and then you have this flow of movement that you string together. Yeah.
It's a fascinating world because it's probably why I'm not sure if I could be an actor, but if someone told me sort of choreograph this and do that, I could probably follow the instructions. But if someone told me to do a monologue of Shakespeare and be dramatic, I'd probably just be like,
Yeah, I think
I'm probably not the guy for that.
That's another thing. I really enjoy Shakespeare. As I said, I like making things understandable for people. It's part of classics as well, translating Latin and Greek in a way that we would speak nowadays, translating phrases they'd have in Latin or Greek into a phrase we would understand in English, like it's raining cats and dogs, as opposed to there was lots of water coming out of the sky. It just makes it more fun to read, more fun to listen to. And Shakespeare was another one of those things. It can be something that's very difficult to understand when you hear it. I like to break things down so that people anyone, I hope, can understand them, and that will also pave the way for Pokémon that we'll talk about in a moment. But yeah.
Well, let's talk about it now.
Okay.
Pokemon is exciting. So let's finish this journey. So 2015, 16, 8, 9, 10 years ago.
That's crazy.
And which is insane. It's insane. Between drama school and Pokemon, was there a little something?
So it's a good segue because I graduated, as I say, it was a 2-year master's course, so I graduated in 2018. And I have an agent, and I'm auditioning for things. It was, very early days, so I didn't have a specialism, whether it was screen or stage or radio or whatever. And, enjoyed auditioning for things, but increasingly, and even more so now than back then, the world is all about being the whole package, not just being an actor, but being the person who creates your own roles, writing them, and also directing, being a multi-hyphenate, having lots of threads to your name, to make yourself as employable as possible. And I think something that really sort of exemplifies that movement was Fleabag, Phoebe Waller-Bridge, who wrote that show, performed it at the Edinburgh Fringe, actually, and I realised I hadn't actually explained what that was, but for anyone unfamiliar, it's, I think, the largest performing arts festival in the world, and throughout August, every summer in Edinburgh. And at every Edinburgh Fringe, there are more shows than there were the previous year. And we're talking like all times of day throughout the month of August. It's a very exciting atmosphere. And so to be able to perform there, as I did with Wonder Drug and the Pleasance as well, which is one of the more well-known names of venues to be a part of, was a real privilege. But Phoebe Waller-Bridge also, she did Fleabag, at the Edinburgh Fringe, and that kickstarted. Well, it didn't kickstart a movement, but it was certainly a sort of shining star in a movement of create your own work. So all of this to say that out of drama school auditioning for things, nothing really coming my way, I started to write comedy skits, spoofs of shows. So like the show Midsummer Murders, I did a spoof of that called Midsummer Accidents. There's Love Island. I did a Winter Love Island, which is all about how miserable these people, they're sort of shivering in their duffel coats because it's they did a series of Love Island over January once, but obviously they're in somewhere else in the world where it's sunny at that time of year. So I was speaking that. I did speaking of Fleabag, actually, I did because Phoebe Waller-Bridge was brought in to help write No Time to Die, the most recent James Bond film, a spoof called Flea Bond. So what if it's Fleabag in the world of James Bond? So he's speaking to the camera and he's edited in the style of Fleabag. All of those are on the same YouTube channel that Wonder Drug is on as well. So I, in modern terms, you could say I was dipping my toe into creating content, which obviously then also paves the way for Pokemon. And the pandemic hits, and as I say, there's not much acting work going around. And something I lean back into a lot in the pandemic is playing Pokemon. So, I think, as we said, the format of this episode is very much like the same life told from three different perspectives. We've talked about cystic fibrosis, we've talked about acting, and now we'll talk about the Pokemon side of things. Which, if you told the younger me that I'd be sat talking on a podcast about an entire aspect of my life is the Pokemon side of things, I'd think, how is that even possible? Because we grew up at a time when content creation, whatever, it didn't exist. They weren't jobs back then. Esports was not a thing when we were growing up. But you and I both were, well, everyone in our year of Merchant Tales, obviously, and beyond, of an age where Pokemon comes around where we're exactly the right sweet spot age to appreciate it, as we said right at the beginning of the recording. It was my brother, who is 4 years older than me, who played it first. And actually, at the time that Pokemon first came out with Red and Blue, I was probably slightly too young to appreciate it. But then Gold and Silver came out, the next games, a few years later, and that was just the perfect storm. I was so into it. Love playing it. And I mentioned how it would come in ebbs and flows throughout childhood, and like after my A levels, dip back into it. After getting into drama school, dip back into it. And then, hadn't touched it for a while, but then the pandemic hits, and I think, well, I could be in it for the long haul here. I'm shielding, obviously. I know we know increasingly that COVID-19 is a respiratory affliction. I remember having the thought pretty early on in lockdown, the situation in the world isn't ideal right now, but something that could be a nice solace, bit of downtime, is doing another playthrough of Pokemon. So I picked up one of the Generation 3 games, and I was playing through that, Ruby, Sapphire and Emerald, that came out around 2002, 2003, I think. I was playing through. This is also when I've just met Sarah and the pandemic happened, so we're having our sort of Zoom dates. I play a bit over the pandemic, and then I don't know, I think just this is around the time when it's all getting a bit much, so I don't sort of allow myself to have fun, really. Everything's just weighing on me a little bit too much. So I put Pokemon to one side again. But then come spring 2021, I'm still shielding at this point. I have had my first vaccine, I think it was early February 2021, but you needed 2, and you had to have the second one 2 months later or something like that. So I'm still shielding. Might seem a strange decision that just before I'm allowed back out into the world, I get a Nintendo Switch, but it was, I think, also because, my parents had seen the absolute roller coaster I've been on during the pandemic. This was clearly something that I really wanted to do. And so very grateful to my parents for, who obviously I was still with at the time. Agreeing that I would get a Nintendo Switch because look at where we are now. I mean, obviously I could have just done it, and I was the age where I could have just got a Nintendo Switch. But I think in terms of it being a gift from them. And so I played through the latest game at the time. It was Pokemon Sword and Shield. That's Generation 8. I was just, you and I used to, we were talking before, the Game Boy Color, this tiny screen, doesn't even have a backlight. I don't know if you've picked up a Game Boy Color recently, Rohit, but you turn it on and it's like, how did I see anything?
Yeah.
They say play in a well-lit room. You have to. You can't see anything. Otherwise, you sit under a lamp, or you have like a worm light on your Game Boy. Then the Game Boy Advance SP had a backlight on it, you can see. But anyway, playing the Nintendo Switch, which, for anyone unfamiliar, is a console that you can play in handheld mode or on the TV. Seeing Pokemon on the bigger screen of the TV for the first time was just mind-blowing, and I had the best time playing through it again. Pokemon games, they're designed for all ages, so, there are definitely difficult bits, but it's not, especially at our age, the most difficult game to complete. So, I'm definitely someone who also likes to explore every nook and cranny of a game. In a couple of weeks, I've beaten the game. And then I discover the competitive side of Pokemon, the way Pokemon battles work. So, to dive more into this, because I sort of teased it at the beginning, rock, paper, scissors meets chess meets poker. Pokemon have types. Water beats fire, fire beats grass, grass beats water, for example. It's far more complex than that. There are 18 more than types now, and they all have their own type chart, the way they relate with each other. That's the rock, paper, scissors element. The chess element is you have 2 of your Pokemon against your opponent's 2 Pokemon on the field at once. Each Pokemon has moves, abilities, held items that interact differently with your opponent's Pokemon. The aim is to knock out all 4 of your opponent's Pokemon before they knock all 4 of yours out. And that means, because, some types will threaten other types more than others, you have to get your Pokemon in the right position. You have to set up the right board state to be able to create a situation where you can go ahead and win. And setting up that board state, working out how all these Pokemon relate to each other, that's the chess element. Like the equivalent of having a pawn in the way of a bishop that could just take it, sort of thing. You have to get your Pokemon in a position where it's safe to be able to threaten without being threatened themselves. Then the poker element is that in chess, you make a move, then your opponent makes a move, then you make a move. In competitive Pokemon, you lock in your moves at the same time. So the timer, you have to anticipate what your opponent's thinking. So like with this Pokemon, I'm going to do this because, I don't know, it's targeted at this point. With this Pokemon, I'm going to switch it out and bring something else in because it's targeted, or I'm going to attack that one because it's threatening that Pokemon. But maybe my opponent's expecting me to do that. So maybe instead I should do X, Y, Z. And then you watch the turn play out until you've got your prediction correct. So that's the poker element of it. You have to try and stay one step ahead of your opponent and try and sort of get inside their head. It's, people may well find it strange that I say this, but it's a really complex game. It's a really difficult game to do well. And yeah, some people who played Pokemon back in the day might remember that there are luck-based elements. You can have a random critical hit where a move will do much more damage than expected. There are some moves that aren't 100% accurate. They could miss. There is a luck-based element, but if it were all down to luck, then we'd see new names winning and then disappearing just as quickly. As it is, there are always the people who are really good at the game, and we see those names time and time again coming out at the forefront and winning competitions. So skill is also a massive part of it, and part of the skill is minimizing that luck-based element. So I discover competitive Pokemon. I love it. I play a lot of it. It gives the game so much more replayability. And then I get into playing competitive, and then I think it's early 2022, I see that, I don't know, I just on YouTube one day, I discover that there is, I believe, we're still we're at the very, I think there's another wave of COVID at that point. Oh no, maybe we're still in it. Yeah, no, I think another wave of COVID towards the end of 2021. Anyway, there's an online tournament, which they would be doing in-person tournaments, but because it's the pandemic, of course, it's all online. And I see these people playing Pokemon, and I hear these voices talking over it, explaining what's going on. And immediately I'm like, well, this combines a lot of the things that I'm interested in. It's presenting, it's making things digestible and accessible to people, which I love from acting and performing. And it's Pokemon. I can't believe this is a thing that exists. This is a job that you can commentate over Pokemon. So I have that in mind, and then there's an online competition in April, and I know that there's an in-person competition in Lille in France in May, and I'm like, okay, I'll enter this online competition, I'll see how it goes, and if it goes well, maybe I'll go to my first in-person tournament. I'm very pleased that online competition went well, because if it hadn't, maybe I wouldn't be where I am now, because it went well, and so I decided, sure, okay, I'll go to Lille, I'll compete. I had a fairly middling performance there, but the point is, I was just immediately enamored with this scene, the community. You go to a Pokemon tournament and you know that you immediately have one thing in common with every single person there, and you can cut the small talk immediately, talk about something you're very passionate about. And my eyes were opened. I was very lucky that in 2022, the World Championships were in London that year at the Excel Centre. And obviously the first World Championships back since the pandemic. And I go as a spectator, to have fun, to, you know, connect with the community, but also I have in mind I would love to be able to commentate these events. And there I meet a couple of people behind Victory Road, so-called company, who are organising grassroots streams of tournaments. And I say, I'd love to have a go at casting. Now, casting is incidentally commentating. They are inundated with people saying, oh, I'd love to have a go at commentating. I mentioned my acting background and they give me a chance. I take a game, mute it, and overdub my own commentary. They like that, and then they sort of give me a trial run on an online tournament that they're organising alongside another caster. You always cast in pairs for that flow of energy. And that went well as well. And then come early 2023, they sort of give me another trial run at a couple of in-person tournaments. And it's that buses thing. In life, you wait for one bus and then two come at once. It's in early 2023 that I'm doing my one-man show, Wonder Drug, that I talked about, performing it in London at this point, as well as going to, it was the Netherlands and also to Sweden to commentate these Pokemon tournaments. And I was enjoying doing both, so I run with that for a while. After I've done Wonder Drug, to now pick back up from where we were right at the start of the episode, I need a break from Wonder Drug for sure. Maybe I'll continue to perform it in my mind at this point, but for now I need to take a step back. And so I do, and increasingly it just becomes... I think life has a way of opening doors, and you just go with the flow sometimes because life is making it so easy. That's what was happening with Pokemon. I was very lucky with the timing, you know, straight after the pandemic, they needed more commentators. And there I was, and I put myself out there. I'm contracted by the Pokemon Company International. I'm not an employee of them. And it was the opposite for Wonder Drug and doing the one-man show. It was just like... various reasons, the edit that went up on YouTube wasn't the one that I wanted to have a slight re-edit of that, but that couldn't happen for various reasons. Money is obviously a big thing. It's to perform at the Edinburgh Fringe or elsewhere, it's a phenomenally expensive thing to do. So the fact that Wonder Drug wasn't, you know, it was successful, but the fact that it wasn't immediately picked up and made into a TV show, I mean, it's not that that's the end of the road, but it would have meant a serious think about, okay, so I really want to put myself out there and spend even more money on something that I don't know if it's going to go anywhere. It's now out there on YouTube for people to see, and, you know, never say never. Maybe I'll do something with it again. But the Pokemon side of things was going so well and so swiftly. And I think most people who get into commentating do so because they know the game really well. They've played for years and years and years, so of course they can talk about the game in depth. I think... the fact that I had been to drama school, the fact that I had that background in acting and performing and was used to be on camera was really appreciated by them because first and foremost, Pokemon is, of course, a family-friendly franchise. And so actually 90% of the viewers, I'm guessing, are watching these tournaments because they like Pokemon. It's not so much that they are really in the weeds, the sort of chess-like element of gameplay and analysis, although there definitely is that element too. They just need a friendly, approachable face to make them feel welcome and still obviously know the game. That's first and foremost the most important thing. But to be able to do it in a way where it doesn't feel like a lecture, to do it in a way where it feels fun. I certainly tend to do a lot of the hosting at these tournaments as well for that reason. Often with the other commentators I'm with, they are not such a fan of hosting, they want to commentate the games, but I love that side of things. So it takes all of those elements, and I think all the commentators that we have, all the casters that we have, they are fantastic in their own way, and we all learn from each other. You teach me and I'll teach you. The Pokemon theme tune taught us that right from day one, and it really is a case of that. I teach some of the other casters things that I learned at drama school, and likewise, everyone has their own skill set, and we all learn from each other. And certainly there are people who've been playing the competitive game for far longer than I have, because for me it was really since 2021. And yeah, so then I lean into commentating these events, and over the course of 2023 through 2024, the Pokemon season really works like the academic year, so it runs from September to August. The World Championships are in August every year. 2023, 2024, I think I commentated 6 of the 9 European regional championships that there were. In Germany, in Poland, Netherlands, France, Italy, etc. I hosted the European International Championships last year, so that's interviewing the players. And again, I now host a podcast, which we'll get into, but that's more of that host side of me. I enjoy, just like you, enjoy talking through people's stories, how they got to where they were, what was going through their heads, sort of really bringing that to life for the viewers. And of course, the drama training is a massive part of that. This year, just a couple of months ago, end of February, I was commentating rather than hosting the Europe International Championships in London at the Excel Centre again. And the drama training that I've had is fundamental in it all. Every single event that I do, I am glad for the training that I had. And it's meant that I think I can, bring a certain level of polish and professionalism to the camera, which I'm very grateful for. And I think it's interesting. You go to university and obviously you come away with X number of essays in a folder that you've done, a piece of paper that is your degree. And LAMDA, sure, I came away with a piece of paper, but all of the work is sort of in here. There's no written work. And so you come away thinking, well, what have I learned? There's nothing tangible, so to speak, that I've come away with, but it's all going on. And it'll be interesting. I'd like to watch myself back acting before going to drama school versus now, and just all of those things settling. And I just know that training, and also the stamina, these are long tournament days, very early mornings through to the evening commentating. You need vocal stamina, you need physical stamina as well. And so just being able to use these things, use your voice, use your body in a way that you don't get overtired over the course of these long days, absolutely crucial as well.
Wow, what a journey. And just to give a flavour of some numbers, because I was bowled over when you told me it a bit earlier, and I need the audience to be as mind-blowing as I am. So you commentated on the European International Championships. That's right, about 2 months ago or so. Walk me through those numbers that you told me before.
Yeah, sure. So that was, as it turned out, the biggest Pokemon event that we've yet seen. Total number of attendees, so that's across Pokemon video game, trading card game, Pokemon Go, Pokemon Unite, as well as just spectators. 13,000 attendees.
1-3.
Yeah, 13,000.
Wow.
And then they're split into age divisions as well. So you've got, or at least the video game and trading card game are. So you've got juniors, seniors, and masters, the oldest age division. For the video game masters, and over the course of the championships, we commentate the masters side of things. These are sort of the names that we're keeping an eye on in the community. And, the juniors and seniors will reach that point one day as well and become those names that we're keeping an eye on. We also do commentate the juniors and seniors finals, which is always exciting. In terms of the video game masters that we had competing that weekend, it was more than 1,400. And I was saying to Tanya in the break that the tickets these days sell out in like a minute to these events. Pokemon is on the up and up and up. And another stat that I told you was Championship Sunday, so the final day of the event, the grand finals of each of the games. This year was more than 400,000 views total up to this point, which was around, I think, again, I might be incorrect a little bit on the numbers here, but around 3 times the number of viewers we had last year. So it really is becoming more and more mainstream, and it's really exciting. It's really exciting times to be involved with competitive Pokemon, especially because we've recently had the announcement of a new game called Pokemon Champions, which currently in a Pokemon game, there's no way to just, or it's difficult to just be able to pick it up and do a Pokemon battle with all of the items, all of your Pokemon battle ready immediately. You've got to build that team in game, and that's a process of a few hours. I find that process really satisfying, but what Pokemon Champions seems to be doing is we don't know yet because we're waiting for confirmation on the details, but it seems to be outsourcing the competitive side to its own game, Pokemon Champions. And the crucial thing about it is not only is it going to be playable on Nintendo Switch, but it's also going to be available on mobile. What this means is that people like yourself and other friends from school who I know, played Pokemon when they were younger, maybe don't take it so seriously now. I can see plenty of people thinking, oh, I can just download that on my phone. I'm up for a little nostalgia trip. Let's download that. Let's do a battle. If Pokemon Champions becomes the main means by which we do battles, all of a sudden, if it's open to anyone with a mobile, as opposed to anyone who has a Nintendo Switch, dramatically 10 times the numbers of people interested in taking part in these tournaments. It's the 30th anniversary of Pokemon next year as well. That means 30 years since the very first games launched in Japan, which was February 27th, 1996. Generation 10 is on the horizon. We're currently on the Generation 9 Pokemon games. You have a new generation of games every few years. Generation 10 is unconfirmed, but, that seems to be the way it's going. Take everything I'm saying here with a pinch of salt, all unconfirmed. And so it's just continuing to rise. We've recently had the esports Olympic Games sanctioned. Pokemon is kind of different from other esports, which are more like real-time, massively multiplayer online things, battle arena things. As I say, it's a bit more chess-like. But Pokemon is very much angling towards being its own esport. And I'm very grateful to myself for putting myself out there and taking the plunge when I did, because even if 1 year later I tried to get into commentating, I just think it would have been so much more difficult, and I feel very fortunate to be in the position that I'm in now.
That's amazing. And before we get into your podcast,
and
I know this might be a surprise question, but just forgive me, I'm sure you'll answer it perfectly. But if you had to pick either your favourite Pokemon, which I'm sure is impossible.
Oh no, I do have one actually.
Oh really?
Yeah,
What's your favourite Pokemon?
So it's called Kingdra. Kingdra. Those of you who played Generation 1 Red and Blue might remember Horsea and Seadra, little seahorse Pokemon. In Generation 1, Horsea evolved into Seadra, and that's where it ended. But in Generation 2, it can evolve again into this Pokemon Kingdra. I've always loved seahorses. I think Kingdra is such a cool design. Generation 2 is my favourite generation. Again, that was just the right age at the right time, that sweet spot. The fact that it evolves from a Generation 1 Pokemon, so it goes back to the roots of the first game that I played, that's part of it. It's a part water, part dragon type, which I think is a really cool combination. It's a Pokemon that's quite difficult to obtain in the game. You have to trade it with someone else, and I didn't have too many people to trade with when I was younger, so I can never have it myself in game. So it's got that element of mystery about it. For all of those reasons and many more, Kingdra is also, it can be good competitively given certain circumstances. So for all those reasons and many more, Kingdra is my favourite Pokemon, and that's why my online name is Chazingdra, because it's Chaz plus Kingdra put together.
That's brilliant. I always thought, I was going to ask you when we went into the podcast element, why is it called that? But I always thought the Chaz bit might be a reference to Charizard or something like that.
You're right. A lot of people assume that.
It's got nothing to do with it.
It's not Charizard.
It's all about Charlie and Kingdra.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
That's amazing. And if you were to pick like a team of, well, I guess you did have your competitive team, but starting from scratch, building it all out.
Yeah.
What would be your? Well, I guess you get 4 Pokemon, right?
So you bring 6. Okay. You have a team of 6, just like you do in the game. But then in team preview, you have a minute and a half to see the team your opponent's bringing, and then based on that, you both choose 4 from your 6 to bring to the battle, and it's best of 3. So in the next battle, you could choose the other 2 and bring those to the battle, mix things up. I mean, the competitive format changes every few months, so it's difficult to just say one team that I would bring. But what I will do, especially for the listeners who and watchers who are here for the nostalgia of Pokemon, I'll limit myself to the Pokemon that can be good from Generation 1. Dragonite.
Yep.
Always very strong. The only Dragon-type Pokemon in Generation 1. These days, you can give it a held item called a Choice Band. That means that it it dramatically increases its damage output at the expense of you're only able to use the first move you select in battle. If you want to reset the move you've chosen, you have to switch it out and switch it back in. It gets a move called Extreme Speed, which goes before most others and deals massive damage, especially with that held item choice band. So that's Dragonite. Electabuzz and Magmar, if you remember those, they've found some success as well. These days, Electabuzz and Magmar can evolve. Back in Generation 1, they couldn't. Pokemon that can evolve can hold an item called an Eviolite, and that bolsters the defenses of a Pokemon that can still evolve. And they're really good support Pokemon. There's a move called Follow Me, for example, that means that the Electabuzz or Magmar becomes the center of attention and not the partner Pokemon on the field. So if you have Electabuzz or Magmar next to a Dragonite, say, they can follow me, so the Dragonite doesn't take any damage while the Dragonite deals massive damage. It means you have to get through this wall of the Electabuzz and Magmar before you can start thinking about the Dragonite. So there's those two. That was good from Generation 1. I think, Blastoise, Charizard, Venusaur, the classics, the OGs, they will always... They've struggled recently, but they will always be decent, at least.
So let's pause there, because you see some interest... When you say sort of a Pokemon struggled recently, is that because just competitively people have figured out ways to defeat them quicker or more easily?
With each generation of Pokemon that's been introduced, it seems that they've all got slightly more powerful. And when you've got that going for nearly 30 years, it means that the Pokemon introduced in the most recent generation are far superior to the ones in Generation 1. So a lot of the time, you will have a Pokemon that maybe you really want to use because you love it. I don't know, Tentacruel, say. But there's just, from a competitive standpoint, no reason to use it over another Pokemon because one of those Pokemon that's been introduced later on can do everything Tentacruel does, but better and more, sort of thing. So that's what I mean when I say it hasn't done so well recently. And also, as I say, the format changes every few months. So recently we've had a format where one restricted Pokemon, so a restricted Pokemon is the mascot legendary that would appear on the box art. Your Mewtwo, your Lugia, your Ho-Oh. One of those is allowed per team, and then 5 others. We're about to enter a competitive format where it's 2 restricted Pokemon per team, and then 4 others. And when the power level is higher like that, because the legendary Pokemon are always much more powerful, it makes some of the original Pokemon, some of the older Pokemon, obsolete, unfortunately. I say that, but there's always niches, there's always ways. It's all about looking at every move a Pokemon can learn, every item they can hold, etc. And you would be able to find a niche. It's just there will be teams that will be more difficult to do well with than others.
Well, that makes sense. Do you know sort of Pokemon would ever, or Nintendo would ever rebalance that? So
I think over the years we have seen a bit of that sometimes. Just the odd random Pokemon will get some kind of boost to its stats, a buff, we would say. Likewise, some Pokemon that have actually been too powerful have received a nerf, so they've had some of their power taken away from them to make the game a little bit more balanced. And that's what it's all about, right? If there was one team that was just the best, then it wouldn't be any fun to play. It's all about the experimentation. There are more than 1,000 Pokemon at this point. So, I mean, being able to showcase all of them. Another thing that's really cool is across video game, trading card game, Go, and Pokemon Unite, different Pokemon have massive success. Dodrio, I don't know if you remember that from Generation 1. Yeah. Apparently really good in Pokemon Unite. Again, it's not a game that I've played too much, but it's multiplayer online battle arena game. So it's more real-time running around a map trying to achieve objectives. You never see Dodrio in competitive Pokemon in the video game. And yeah, likewise, there are trading cards that have been good showcasing Pokemon that we never see in the video game, and the same with Pokemon Go. So when you've got all of that available to you, and part of the reason Pokemon is so appealing, I think, is that you can experiment with all kinds of Pokemon and see what they achieve. There's a famous line that one of the Elite Four members says. So the Elite Four are the final bosses of the game. One of the Elite Four members in Generation 2 says something along the lines of, strong Pokemon, weak Pokemon, that is only the selfish perception of people. Truly skilled trainers try and win with their favourites. And there are some trainers who really set at the heart and will bring their favourites to tournaments and try and win with them. As I say, more of an uphill struggle than if you are using some Pokemon that are thriving in a format. But, you can just choose to play for fun. And I think that's a massive part of the appeal. But I think the biggest thing to say here is just that nostalgia is such a powerful thing. I think especially in this day and age where the world is increasingly uncertain, that escapism, going back to the things that provided so much joy when you were younger, when you didn't have so many cares in your mind, is always a comfy place to go back to.
Absolutely. I mean, speaking of that, I probably wouldn't go beyond Generation 4, just because 1 to 4 was my childhood. Yeah. And, I wouldn't, whilst the other generations have played and enjoyed and continue to enjoy, Generations 1 to 4 they're just a bit of me. Yeah. I can even remember the first time I ever saw Pokémon, which was actually someone else playing it on their own Game Boy. And I was such a nerd when I was younger. I was at chess camp.
This is something we need to own. Being a nerd is something we need to own and celebrate. Because essentially, saying that you're a nerd is another way of saying that I'm really passionate about something. And it's the people who follow those passions that end up being the happiest and, carving their own path to success. So, all you nerds out there, we see you and we celebrate you. Keep doing you. Continue, sorry.
And I was at chess camp. And there were a group of people gathered around this one guy, and it was day one, so we didn't really know anyone. So I was like, how could this guy be so popular so quickly? So I sort of scurried over to him because I was sort of thinking, well, how do I be this popular at 10 years old? And realised he had a Game Boy, original, and was playing Pokemon Red. And just for the whole half an hour break, we were just watching him play Pokemon. And then I immediately went home and badgered my mother to buy me whatever this amazing thing is.
Wow, that's a really interesting story. And it also paves the way for where we are now with streaming and Twitch and stuff. It is very absorbing watching someone playing a game. Yeah.
If only I was as visionary as at 10 years old to think and create something like that. But I can capture Pokemon and I'll have a little flashback and be like, oh wait, I've used this before. And when I last caught a Magnemite or something fun, I'd be like, I was sitting in my car and I was as a passenger in the back, and we were on this trip to wherever, down to Devon, and we just needed to play something for 4 hours as we were driving. So that nostalgia, as you say, is so powerful because it's childhood memories that are locked away, that get unleashed and triggered because of what you're doing.
I think essays could be written about just why Pokemon has been as phenomenally popular as it is. Like, I was talking to Tanya about this in the break as well, but Pokemania at the time when it first came out, I don't think we've really seen anything like it since. It was just everywhere and everyone's obsessed. I don't think you can ever quite repeat the debut like that of a franchise because it's its own special thing. It will never be brand new again. But as I say, it just Pokemon is bigger than ever, and I don't know, maybe 8 to 10 year olds these days, Pokemon is as much of a craze as it was then. But it's just looking into the psyche of why Pokemon has been so popular, what it is about it. For me, as I say, I've always loved animals, and I think that's something to do with it. I can never have a pet because part of cystic fibrosis is not having fur around the house, or at least it's advised against because it's a respiratory condition. So maybe it's partly vicariously that, as well as the strategy, the way competitive games work, but also that I was never into the really violent stuff, the fighting. I mean, there's fighting in Pokemon, but they knock each other out rather than kill each other, of course. And it was a happy medium of a story as well as battles, and just endlessly replayable. But as I say, I find it fascinating, the whole phenomenon as to why it has been so popular.
Yeah, and I think one thing to add to that, from my perspective, is that actually, I'll go back a little bit further. So, I do still watch quite a bit of anime. Yeah. A whole host of other things. And obviously when we were younger, we watched cartoons. And often people go, right, you're supposed to be like a relatively serious individual. You're an accountant. You're supposed to be doing all these quite serious things. And I go, but I'm a human as well. So that's what it is. But anime is of course not the Simpsons or Family Guy. It is just a different format of explaining a beautiful story. But it gives you more tools, or the creators have more tools to be able to express more emotion more differently or build out a story, I believe anyway. And one of the most interesting observations I think I've made, or many people make, about the difference in anime and cartoons is that cartoons, like, I'm using generally terms like The Simpsons and Family Guy. Quite rarely do you want to actually be Homer Simpson or Peter Griffin. You kind of just watch them, and they're kind of silly oafs, and maybe there's some commentary about representations of American society, but mainly it's just they're quite stupid and funny, and you just watch them, and it's hilarious. They're brilliant shows. But with anime, more often than not, you kind of want to be the main character. Like, you want to embody them, and you want to have their life. And that's kind of how I want to be. How I feel about Pokemon. I want to be a Pokemon trainer. I want to have my sixth here, and I want to have a Professor Oak, and I want to go on a journey and be adventurous. And I think Ash Ketchum is 10 years old in the in the anime, but maybe
off you go, travel the world.
But maybe not that young. But certainly when there's a level of maturity, that thought experiment of being free and adventurous and having a couple of friends and competing, and there's of course some emotional sides to Pokemon as well, and you get attached to, as you said before, your sort of pets and your animals. You want to see them grow and evolve and do amazing things and have fun with them. So that embodiment element was very much how I feel when I play Pokemon. I mean, that's obviously what a role-playing game is supposed to be like. Yeah. But at the same time, it's the ability to do that and feel that, but also do it in probably infinite ways with 1,000 Pokemon, so many games, different scenarios. I think is a masterstroke. I think it's an absolute genius masterstroke behind the creators of Pokemon that you can. I think it's the only game I've ever played more than once.
Right. Yeah.
And I've probably played it hundreds of times.
And it's so replayable. That's the thing. And I think as with some role-playing games, but I think Pokemon does it better than most. You choose the name of your main character. Your main character doesn't say anything. It's just a blank slate for you to project yourself onto, which is a massive part of it as well. Anime, I actually haven't seen too much of, but of course, plenty of my friends from within Pokemon love all kinds of anime, and I'm sure it's only a matter of time. Maybe I'll take recommendations from you, actually, as to what I should start with watching. But you're so right. They are so absorbing in their own way.
Well, I would touch on the anime. A lot of anime is quite violent, so if you don't like the violent side, then I can recommend some relatively non-violent anime. But the hottest one right now just finished second season, Solo Leveling. If you're going to watch multi-layered, I think master class in anime, that's one for the ages. Okay. It's a relatively new one as well, and it skyrocketed to fame because it's just I think it's awesome. There's some old classics like Dragon Ball Z, which you might have, that's been going for decades, but a lot of it, I watch that because of the nostalgia, and it's just fun when it pops up. But if I were to recommend one, it is on the violent side, but the story behind it is just unreal. But you'll find, and I'm hoping you agree with me, you want to be the character. Like you picture yourself as that person, as their solo leveling. Whereas in cartoons you don't. You just watch for fun. And speaking of watching for fun, and continuing on with your Pokemon passion, your podcast, at Chazingdra. So Chazingdra is the online name. Chazingdra Chats is the name of the podcast. Fantastic. We're going to put the links in the descriptions. And talk to me about it. What do you do with it? How can people connect with you? What's your favourite thing to talk about? Autumn 2022, I wake up at like 4 a.m. one day, and it's always the way, isn't it? We have our best ideas at ungodly hours of the day. Yes. And it's one of those things where I'm thinking about it so much and so excited about it that I struggle to get back to sleep. I think I actually have to jot some ideas down just to try and put my mind at rest so I can go back to sleep. I come up with this idea for a podcast where, at this point, I am... In fact, I haven't actually done any commentating at this point, but I'm certainly wanting to get into the Pokemon community. I think a good format for a show is, why don't I talk to people about their life stories, much like this,
And peppered in within that, the 6 Pokemon they choose for their dream team, which is often going to be like a Pokemon that represent something to them. People might choose, say if they're an artist, they might choose Smeargle, which is a beagle Pokemon that paints with its tail. There's that way of doing things, or it's just like, this Pokemon was special to me because I won this tournament with it, or because it was my first partner Pokemon. That's what we call the starter Pokemon, your Bulbasaur, Charmander, Squirtle, for example. Be it competitive or any guest within the community, content creator, whatever. At the time, I am writing my one-man show, and 2023, I'm very much focused on that, so I don't do anything with it. But by the time, and we've come back to this point again, by the time I finish Wonder Drug, and I'm doing more Pokemon commentating, I find myself at a bit of a crossroads in the new year of 2024, where I'm like, if I want to give content creation a go, now is the time. I finished Wonder Drug. There are no plans for it on the horizon. I could make them if I want to, but maybe I want to try content creation. Better to try it now rather than get absorbed doing something else and then find myself with no time to give it the proper time of day. I'm very pleased I did that. So I decide to go ahead with this podcast idea, Chazingdra Chats. I launched it, in fact, Thursday the 10th of April, so a week ago at the time of recording. That's the anniversary of my channel. So Thursday 10th of April 2024, I launched the channel with the first episode of the podcast with my good friend Lee Provost, who also goes by Osiris VGC. He's a commentator as well as a content creator. He does fantastic video guides on how to get the very most out of the games. Like, there'll be timed battle events in game, and so what's the best way to counter what the game has to throw at you. Shout out to you, Lee. Fantastic guy and very helpful guy. I sort of see Lee in a way as another sort of Helen Eastman character in my life, because he had been a content creator for many years. When I told him early 2020, it would have been early 2024 at the same time, that I was thinking of leaning into content creation, and he's just been so helpful. He helped design the art for my channel, and just advice from all his experience of streaming and over the years. He was my first guest, and then it's gone from there. I've had competitors on, I've had other commentators from Trading Card Game Go and Pokemon Unite, content creators within Pokemon, shiny hunters, we'll get into that in a moment. And sort of, we'd released the 50th episode a couple of weeks ago, and it's just sort of, there's so many people I love, just like you're doing this podcast. I love hearing people's stories, and I love sharing them with the world, and get to know the person behind the Pokemon, essentially. And as Pokemon skyrockets in popularity, I think people will take a lot from that. So there's a podcast, but actually the main reason I wanted to get into content creation is because I love writing. I loved writing Wonder Drug. I'd written those sketches, Midsummer Accidents, Winter Love Island, Fleabag. And however, I realised late last year, so late 2024, that I've been spending so much time on the podcast, which is understandable. When you're starting something, you want to give it all your attention before you then sort of take your foot off a little bit and split your attention to other things, that I hadn't actually done that much scripted content, and that's the whole reason why I went into content creation. So now what I'm aiming to do, I'm currently working on a big video summarising my experience of those European Championships in London a couple of months ago, the event from the caster's perspective, and what I bring from my drama school training to the event, as well as breaking down the event in real layman's terms for newcomers to the scene who are interested in competitive Pokemon but might necessarily not know all of the ins and outs of it, like yourself. So break it down so anyone can understand it. And having written a one-man show, I hope that, as I said, the main lesson I learned from that is to bring the heart, and that's what makes the story land so much more. So telling the story from my perspective rather than just a dry summary of what happened at the event, and going from there. So I'm looking forward to that. I'm really enjoying working on the script. It'll be my first time editing a video like that, so I don't know how long that's going to take, but I'm hoping it will come out soon. To come back to shiny hunting, as of Generation 2, there are vanishingly rare, alternately coloured variants of Pokemon, known as shiny Pokemon. By rare, we're talking there's a 1 in 8,192 chance in the generations 2 to 5, kind of generation 1, but we won't get into it, games of finding a shiny Pokemon. And when I was younger, just as you said, you play through Pokemon like 10 times. On one of my many playthroughs of the game, very early on, I encountered this Kakuna, which many listeners and watchers will be familiar with. It's a Cocoon Pokemon. Cocoon is yellow, but this Kakuna is green. And I encounter it, and it sparkles on encounter. And I'm like, that's cool. I will catch it. It evolves into Beedrill, and lo and behold, it's a green Beedrill. And I'm kind of like, what's going on? In those games, because it was for the Game Boy Color, they introduced this idea of Pokemon that are different colors. So in those games, you encounter the red Gyarados, and that introduces this mechanic of shiny Pokemon into the game. If I hadn't had that experience of chancing upon this random shiny Kakuna when I was younger, maybe I wouldn't have lent into shiny hunting, because shiny hunting is kind of, as you might be able to guess at this point, you're just running around in the grass or what have you in Pokemon until you find a Pokemon that shines. And as I say, 1 in 8,192 chance. It's going to take ages. And when I first saw shiny hunting content on YouTube, I thought, what is going on? How are they staying sane? Why are they doing this? Where is the appeal? But increasingly, it's become this very cozy thing. And if you only have your attention on the screens that you're shiny hunting on, you will go insane. It's very monotonous indeed. But to have that going on while you're watching a video on YouTube, or you're listening to a podcast, or you're watching a film or whatever, it's actually a very calming thing to do. And the time flies if you're invested in the other thing you're doing alongside. By the end of it, you might have this very cool shiny Pokemon. At the time of recording, I said to you, Rohit, I've been shiny hunting for Totodile, one of the first partners, sort of the equivalent of Squirtle, but in Generation 2. In my childhood copy of Pokemon Silver, and last night I found it. And I showed you the clip where I am in utter disbelief that it's happened. It took 6,555 resets, which again sounds insane to people listening. It totally is. But just being able to lean back into that nostalgia, and the idea that these shiny Pokemon have been lurking in the game that I've had for years and years and years, just waiting to be discovered, and I never did as a child. The fact that there's this whole new dimension to the games that I didn't appreciate when I was younger as much, I just find really, really exciting. So that is something I do as well. And this is why I say that nostalgia is such a powerful thing. Because, yeah, on the face of it, it is a crazy thing to do. But just reconnecting with that, and especially when you're streaming and you're talking to chat as well while doing the shiny hunting, as well as streaming competitive play, as well as challenge runs. Like I'm doing a joint challenge with my friend Lee, who I mentioned there. We are playing through remakes of the Generation 4 games that they did for the Nintendo Switch, Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, with Nuzlocke rules, and that means that when a Pokemon faints, you can't use it again for the rest of the playthrough. You have to catch the first Pokemon that appears on any route. But we're doing that linked. It's called a Soul Link Nuzlocke. So if I lost my first partner Pokemon, my starter Pokemon, then Lee would also never be able to use his for the rest of the run. So there's a pressure on each other to make it a success. We failed at that challenge a couple of weeks ago, or last week, and I'm looking forward to starting again. We go again until we beat the challenge. What I'm saying is there are all kinds of ways to enjoy Pokemon, and I think in terms of other games, I found increasingly that I'll pick them up, try them, and just think, it's fun, but it's not Pokemon. And Pokemon offers so many ways of playing, from the very, very casual shiny hunting right up to the very, very intense competitive play, and it offers something for every occasion, and it feels like home. I think that's the most important part here. So the fact that my channel, as I say, is a year old now, is now monetized. The fact that I'm now in a position where I'm making money from Pokemon, be it doing the commentating or just putting my own videos out there, my own content out there, is it's bananas to me, because I think we're part of a generation that just missed out on that. It's a couple of years younger than us that really streaming and gaming professionally became a thing. The fact that it is a thing still blows my mind, and I feel very lucky to be able to do it. But it's also not the be-all and end-all necessarily. I'm really enjoying doing this now, but the acting, yeah, sure, I focus more on the commentating and the Pokemon side of things recently, but maybe there will come a time where I want to use all of the experience I've gained from being on stage presenting to lean a bit more into acting again, or look for other hosting presenting opportunities on TV or more broadly and beyond. And the Pokemon's there alongside, but as I say, life sometimes just suggests to you that you should keep pursuing something. And when I had this opportunity with commentating, I was like, how do I capitalize on this? I've always wanted to try this content creation thing. I really enjoy writing. it's not like I'm starting from zero. I have this, I've started to make a name for myself because I'm on these broadcasts that go out to the 6.5 million subscribers that the Pokemon channel has. So let me try this out and see where it goes. So, yeah, I think, as you were saying, talking about chess camp, people may well look at me and others who play Pokemon now and think, aren't you a little bit old? You're early 30s. And yeah, to a certain extent, totally agree. But at the same time, we're kind of part of a generation that is trailblazing this for the first time. It may well be that we get to a point where it's normal for 50-plus-year-olds, say, to be playing Pokemon because we have grown up with Pokemon. It's evolved with us. So yeah, again, I'm picturing myself that this even is a job, and I'm feeling very lucky that I'm doing it.
I agree. And to add one more point to that, couldn't care less if someone judged me for playing Pokemon at 32 years old. I'm the one sitting there and playing it, and thoroughly enjoying it.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
It's a personal thing.
I think there's as soon as you own it, I think this goes for anything in life. As soon as you own what you're doing, you're just comfortable in your own skin, and you're doing something you're passionate about. You are the winner in that situation, you know. I think sooner or later, every single person comes to the realization that it's all about doing what you want to do rather than feeling that you should be doing what you should do. Yeah. That's where the happiness comes from. That's where you feel like you're thriving.
No, I agreed. Just before we wrap up, I want to bring in something interesting because listeners, watchers might be thinking, Rohit, you interview entrepreneurs. Charlie's a fascinating individual, rather handsome. Why the hell is he here? And my very strong argument, I think, is that whilst you might not necessarily call yourself an entrepreneur, you certainly are one. And you are one for a multitude of reasons. But one is that clearly how your career has gone, and we spent the last few hours walking through it, your acting journey in particular is very akin to an entrepreneurial journey. Now, yes, fine, you're not creating a product and selling it or a service you're selling, but you have a skill set that you're building and putting out in the world. Of course, you are a content creator, a writer, comedian. All those elements there are skill sets that you're bringing into everything that you're doing. And of course, there's a direct element of being a commentator, host. So for me, I see your journey as very entrepreneurial and very relatable to anyone that's trying to do something. You have taken a skill set that you've harnessed and honed over many years and trying to monetize it, and also doing something that you loved for many years and continue to love. And that's the sweet spot of where you create businesses, and you don't necessarily have to label it as such, but if it looks like a duck and smells like a duck, then so my question to you is, do you see yourself as an entrepreneur?
It's really interesting because when you initially messaged me about this autumn last year, I think my initial reaction for a moment was similar to what you've said just then. Like, am I? I'm not really an entrepreneur. But then very quickly I realised, yeah, I guess I am. It's the first time I'd thought about it like that. So what I'm saying is I didn't until you drew my attention to it. And increasingly going forward, I guess, now that we're at a point of a monetized YouTube channel and the job I do hosting and commentating, increasingly it does feel like that. Certainly the mindset, that entrepreneurial mindset, is essentially the same from what I'm doing versus what other people who are maybe entrepreneurs in the more traditional sense are doing. So the answer is I do see myself as an entrepreneur, especially because, whereas I'm not... traditionally entrepreneurs sort of, as you say, they've come up with this product that they're offering and selling. Increasingly in the world of content creation, you are creating a brand out of yourself. Sort of, I am the product sort of thing. So, as a streamer, as a content creator, people will come and hang out because they enjoy, hopefully, the company that I provide. And just, I'm blessed with the surname Merriman as well. It's very much, especially as part of a family-friendly franchise like Pokemon, it's all about just, listen, whatever cares you have going on in your life right now, it's always important to be able to take a step back and just chill out at the end of the day. Remember, there's so much beauty in life, and I'm there to provide that merriment. And that's something I bring to the streams as well. I try and come up with really bad sort of dad jokes, but Pokemon style, that I will dish out. I very much sort of make that my thing. So yeah, I'm an entrepreneur conveying nostalgic merriment to the world, I guess.
Well, given that then, so what's next in the entrepreneurial journey?
Yeah, well, for now, I've always been someone who goes with the flow. There's never really a grand plan, which I think ultimately has served me, because you don't want to be too tied down to any particular path. You want to be open to the possibilities. In terms of the content creation, yeah, thoroughly enjoying it. Again, so my main focus right now is getting more scripted content out there. Always love writing, and I'm looking forward to seeing people's reactions to that. Keep the podcast going, and see where it goes, really. Yeah, I guess that's kind of as much as I can say on that point, because I have no idea. But it certainly felt very right doing content creation, and again, something I've kind of always done, given the sketches I was doing just after drama school, and the other creative projects that I always find myself doing. The creativity always finds a way. You can try and quieten it, but you're not going to be successful. It will channel itself. It will have an output in some way. And hopefully, yeah, the channel will go from strength to strength. I'd love to sort of become, and sort of following on from what I was saying there about being a merry person, conveying Pokemon to the world, just sort of becoming that public face, essentially, and Pokemon increasingly isn't just this niche gaming thing, it's for everyone, and to be known as someone who makes it for everyone, and to spread its good word, almost, in the public domain, or in the more mainstream domain, I mean, would be something I would love to continue doing in terms of commentating. Yeah, hopefully that will continue to go from strength to strength. Love the events that I've commentated so far. And again, maybe it will pave the way for other presenting work. And yeah, maybe acting will come back into the fray as well. So just generally in this whole nexus that I've been building up, that I've been talking about for the past few hours, is very much my happy place, and we'll see where it continues to go. But I'm very glad that content creation has become a thing, because it feels like it was something that I was always supposed to do at some point.
We have a tradition on this show.
Yeah.
We wrap up with a final question, which you've had a bit of time to prepare for.
Yeah.
And the question is, if your 18-year-old self had a discussion with your 80-year-old self,
yeah,
what would the discussion be about?
So, I think overall there would be a lot of laughter. And that's not just me leaning into the merry branding thing. I think I am really good at turning anything that could be perceived as a negative or something I could regret into a positive. Running with it. It's like we were talking about earlier. Something that doesn't go your way, that you've been working hard towards. Maybe there's a grander plan at play that you'll end up preferring. And for that reason, I don't really have regrets, I would say. So it's not, I don't think it would be the case that my 80-year-old self would be saying, you should do this, you should do X, you should do Y, you should do Z. I think it would just be like, as I said right at the start as well, I'm fascinated generally in things. I think the most interesting people in life are interested in others, have a broad range of interests. So yeah, you know, I'd want to hear from my 80-year-old self. Do you still play Pokemon? Is that socially acceptable as an 80-year-old to play Pokemon? I hope so. It seems to be the way we're going. First of all, as well as just how other things played out. You know, did you lean back into acting? What happened? And I think my 80-year-old self from the 18-year-old self would be, I don't know, just trying to reconnect with what it would have been like to feel that age. I think there was an element of this question that immediately came to me, which is more somber, which is with a medical condition like cystic fibrosis, life expectancy, we don't know. We don't know what's happening. And with the medicine Kaftrio, with this wonder drug, maybe, I'm sure it will have a positive effect, but it remains to be seen. But there is a question as to whether I would reach that age in the first place. But fundamentally, who knows on any of these kind of things. But also, I think, it's all about making a good time out of the life that you've been given. And I think, it's a really interesting question. And I think we'd learn a lot from each other. We'd have a lot of laughs. And I think we'd probably be inseparable.
Thank you very much, Charlie.
Thank you.
All right, cheers.
It's been a pleasure.